Chapter 1482. Nie Tian sensed that Duguanai wanted to escape and his face darkened, but he did not dare to stop him. At this time, Duguanai was still on the arena. If Nie Tian made a move, it would be breaking the rules of the grand competition of the 12 shrines. If that was the case, he would be disqualified from participating in the competition, or even killed. It was not worth it to take such a big risk to keep Duguanai. At this time, Duguanai suddenly raised his head and looked at Nie Tian coldly. He said provocatively, "Goodbye, Nie Tian." With that said, Duguanai stepped into the black whirlpool, and his figure disappeared immediately. Nie Tian watched as Duguanai left, but he could not stop him. He could not help but scold, "Cunning!" The pupil of the Devil's Knight was too strange. Nie Tian did not know what kind of ability it had. Duguanai was also cunning enough. Once he took advantage of it, he immediately left. "Duguanai, you bastard!" After Duguanai left, Xue Wushuang was even more furious than Nie Tian. His sage arm had been taken away by Duguanai, and his strength would be greatly reduced in the future. Duguanai took away Xue Wushuang's sage arm, but did not kill him. Instead, he let him live in shame. This was the cruelest thing. Xue Wushuang's sage arm was taken away, so he felt worse than death. Only at this moment did everyone come to their senses, and they stared blankly at the arena with astonished expressions. Nie Tian's body moved, and he arrived on the arena. Sensing the aura left behind by the black vortex, he frowned slightly and murmured, "Duguanai is indeed cunning." He left a space-time vortex somewhere else before the battle. He had already found a way out. Devil's Knights, I could create a space-time vortex. Before the battle, Duguanai had left a space-time vortex in another place. Then, he had left this place and gone to another place. Duguanai was extremely cunning. He had already prepared everything. As soon as something went wrong, he would immediately leave. Damn it! Xue Wushuang finally understood and roared. The anger in his eyes almost set him on fire. At this very moment, his hatred towards Duguanai had even surpassed that of Nie Tian. "Duguanai, you snatched my saint's arm, but you didn't kill me. You let me be mocked by others and live in shame. I, Xue Wushuang, swear to kill you." Xue Wushuang roared at the sky like a ferocious beast. Nie Tian took a look at Xue Wushuang, but didn't say anything. Instead, he turned around and left. He and Xue Wushuang had killed his father, and he also wanted to kill him. However, he would not take advantage of him. The result of the battle between Xue Wushuang and Duguanai was beyond everyone's expectations. Although Duguanai's strength was above Xue Wushuang's, he had escaped. Therefore, the final result was Xue Wushuang's victory. Xue Wushuang had lost his saint's arm and lost most of his combat strength. He immediately forfeited the following battles. As a result, there were only 5 people left in the arena: Nie Tian, Luo Zian, Jian Qiu, Xian Wuhan, and Yao Yan. The following battles were still in the cruel elimination system. However, there were only 5 people left, so they had to draw lots to decide who would fight. Nie Tian and the other 4 came to the side of the old man in green and each drew a lot. Nie Tian opened the lot and wrote one word: "Empty." As for Luo Zian's signature, there was a 1 written on it. Jian Qiu's signature was also a 1. Xian Wuhan's and Yao Yan's signatures were both 2. I didn't expect my luck to be so good. I actually entered the top 3 without having to compete. Nie Tian looked at the jade lot in his hand and could not help but smile faintly. He was very lucky to draw a blank and advance to the next round. The remaining 4 people fought in pairs: Luo Zian against Jian Qiu, Xian Wuhan against Yao Yan. Nie Tian's eyes flickered as he looked at Luo Zian. He had not expected that Luo Zian and Jian Qiu would meet each other in advance. The battle between these 2 is very beneficial to me. No matter who wins, it will not be easy. This way, I will be able to witness their true strength. It will be very beneficial for my upcoming battles. Nie Tian thought to himself as he glanced at Luo Zian and Jianqiu. At this moment, Luo Zian's beautiful eyes flickered inadvertently. She did not seem to care. Of course, she could guess what Nie Tian was thinking. However, she smiled coldly and looked at Nie Tian. She said directly, Nie Tian, it is impossible for you to understand my strength through Jianqiu. Jianqiu will definitely not be able to withstand my second sword. Her cold voice resounded in the void. It was very loud, and she did not hide anything from anyone. In Luo Zian's eyes, Jianqiu was not a match at all. When the crowd heard Luo Zian's words, their eyes trembled. They did not expect this woman to be so insolent. She did not even care about the number 1 genius of Sky Sword Divine Palace. Luo Zian, you are too arrogant. Jianqiu's expression was unusually ugly. He stared coldly at Luo Zian and said in a deep voice, I know that you have the legendary forbidden body, but I am not ordinary either. No one knows the outcome of our battle until the very last moment. Is that so? Luo Zian sneered and no longer paid attention to Jianqiu. Instead, she looked at Nie Tian and said, Nie Tian, I admit that your talent is not below mine. However, your current strength is too weak. If you want to continue living, you should voluntarily forfeit the competition. Voluntarily forfeit the competition? Nie Tian raised his eyebrows. However, he raised the jade lot in his hand and said, I have already entered the top 3. Even the heavens are helping me. Do you think I will forfeit the competition? Ignorant. Luo Zian smiled coldly and said, I have already said that no one can stand in my way. Those who stand in my way will die. This sentence has always been effective. If you are really not afraid of death, then give it a try. With that, Luo Zian's figure moved and she left. Nie Tian looked at the purple figure in the sky and smiled slightly. He said, I will give it a try. Jianqiu looked at Luo Zian's back and gnashed his teeth in hatred. He said in a deep voice, I must kill this woman with my own hands. Following that, Nie Tian and the others left the arena. After a short break, the competition finally began. 2 sharp figures appeared on the arena. They were Luo Zian and Jianqiu. The two stood stiffly in the air above the arena, each releasing a powerful sword aura. The murderous intent around them was extremely dense, like 2 sharp swords that could destroy the world. The crowd was practically boiling as they stared at the 2 figures. This was a battle that they had been waiting for a long time. Before Nie Tian's appearance, everyone believed that Luo Zian and Jianqiu were the 2 strongest in this competition. However, Nie Tian's appearance changed some people's opinions. However, there were still many people who believed that Luo Zian and Jianqiu were the 2 strongest. Nie Tian looked at the 2 murderous figures and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. He said with a playful smile, Luo Zian, you talk big. I wonder if your strength is as big as your tone. Chapter 1483. In the arena, everyone's eyes were focused on the 2 figures in midair. The highly anticipated battle between Luo Zian and Jianqiu was about to begin. The experts in the pavilions high up in the sky were also filled with anticipation. They were very curious about who would win this battle. Luo Zian has one of the 4 legendary ancient forbidden bodies. Furthermore, she is extremely talented in the sword Dao. Up until now, no one has been qualified to make her draw her sword. I'm afraid that her strength is the most terrifying, Yao Chen said solemnly. He was very glad that Yao Yan's opponent was not Luo Zian. Although he did not say it explicitly, his meaning was very clear. Luo Zian's strength was higher than Jianqiu's. Jianqiu might be strong, but he should be slightly inferior to Luo Zian, the other palace lords echoed, agreeing with Yao Chen's opinion. Humph! Jian Wuya sneered, clearly disagreeing with Yao Chen and the others. Jianqiu was his son, so he naturally hoped that Jianqiu would win. However, he had a vague feeling that Luo Zian's body was hiding a terrifying power, so he was still very worried about Jianqiu. Even so, Jian Huiao was still very hopeful that Jian Qiu would win. He felt that even if Jian Qiu was no match for Luo Zian, he still had the strength to protect himself. The heartbroken prince did not speak, as even he could not see through Luo Zian's true strength. On the arena, Luo Zian and Jian Qiu faced off in the air. Although the two of them had not made a move, their sword auras had already begun to collide. The sound of swords clashing rang out in the void. When Luo Zian released her sword aura, her long-hidden sword Dao realm was immediately revealed. It was the peak of sword bone. It was already very heaven-defying for her to reach the sword bone realm at her age. Luo Zian, you hid your sword Dao cultivation so deeply. I was wondering how amazing it would be, but you are still only at the sword bone realm like me. Jian Qiu sneered, looking very pleased with himself. He had originally thought that Luo Zian must have hidden her strength since she had spoken so confidently. He thought that her sword Dao realm might have already reached the sword essence realm. Now that he knew that Luo Zian was only at the sword bone realm, he felt a deep sense of disdain. As long as Luo Zian wasn't at the sword essence realm, he would be able to put up a fight. It should be known that he was a rare wind and wood dual elemental swordsman. His speed and defense were both extremely terrifying. If he encountered a swordsman of the same level, he could almost kill him instantly. Even though Luo Zian had a taboo body, Jian Qiu didn't think she was very heaven-defying. Make your move. Luo Zian sneered, and a strangely shaped long sword appeared in her hand. It didn't seem to have a physical body. It was actually condensed from a mass of nothingness like thick smoke. However, one could roughly make out that it was a sword. This sword was Luo Zian's primordial spirit sword, Thousand Cloud Violet Mist. This was the first time Luo Zian had used her sword in front of everyone. It was clear that she valued Jian Qiu very much. Thousand Cloud Purple Mist, long time no see. In the stands, when Ye Tian saw the longsword in Luo Zian's hand, his eyes couldn't help but tremble. He couldn't help but think of some things. Countless scenes of the past flashed through his mind. In the past, whenever he recalled these scenes, he would feel an incomparable pain in his heart. But now, Ye Tian's heart was very calm. He just felt that it was a little ridiculous. After truly recognizing Luo Zian, he was completely relieved. It really wasn't worth it to be sad for such a cold person. Now, he had Mo Rushi and Schwer by his side. These two girls were the ones who were worthy of his lifelong love. To him, Luo Zian was already in the past. Moreover, it was a meaningless past. Luo Zian's sword is so strange. The moment Luo Zian revealed her Thousand Cloud Violet Mist, many people exclaimed. They had never seen such a strange sword spirit. At the same time, a sword spirit also appeared in Jian Qiu's hand. Bleak Autumn Wind. Luo Zian. Jian Qiu looked at Luo Zian, and the corners of his mouth curled up into a cold smile. He said coldly, "If you let me attack first, I'm afraid you won't have the chance to attack." Jian Qiu was very confident in his sword. He was a wind and wood dual attribute swordsman. His sword intent contained a strong wind attribute. The speed of his sword was very fast and would arrive in an instant. He wouldn't give his opponent any chance to react at all. Wang Ying had been defeated by him with a single strike. Humph! Luo Zian smiled cold and said, "You haven't attacked yet. How do you know that my sword will be slower than yours?" Huh! Jian Qiu's eyes suddenly darkened. He said loudly, "Luo Zian, unless you are a swordsman with the essence of the sword, your sword can't be faster than mine." Ye Tian was also stunned when he heard Luo Zian's words. He had seen Jian Qiu's sword before. It was extremely fast. It was the fastest sword he had ever seen. Even Cher was slightly inferior to Jian Qiu in this aspect. However, from what Luo Zian said, it seemed like her sword was faster than Jian Qiu's. This was simply impossible for Ye Tian. "Jian Qiu, make your move." At that moment, Luo Zian's voice sounded again. She said cold, "I'm giving you a chance to attack. Otherwise, you won't even be able to block a single strike of my sword." Arrogant. Jian Qiu's eyes turned cold. He was instantly enraged. A violent sword intent appeared around him, whistling and surging in the void. Bleak autumn wind, withering sword. Jian Qiu growled and directly stabbed out with his sword. Suddenly, a sword shadow surged out and attacked Luo Zian like an arrow leaving a bow. Jian Qiu spared no effort in this attack. He wanted to amaze the world with a single brilliant feat. He even wanted to kill his opponent with a single strike. So fast. Nie Tian's eyes flickered. He had the starry sky eyes, but he was actually unable to see the sword shadow. All he saw was an afterimage that flashed by and disappeared. There was no doubt that the speed of this sword was even sharper and more murderous than the one that had defeated Wang Ying. Luo Zian was not someone Wang Ying could compare to. Jian Qiu had to go all out. Boom! An incredible sound rang out. It was an incredible sword. The incredible speed, the incredible angle, and the incredible trajectory had triggered an incredible murderous intent. In the face of this fatal sword, Luo Zian's beautiful eyes flickered. She did not reveal panic, but deep disdain. "Autumn sword, your sword is too slow." In the next instant, Luo Zian's voice rang out. At the same time, she moved. Then, a strange scene appeared. As Luo Zian moved, countless afterimages of her appeared in the void. With every step she took, one afterimage appeared. It was extremely strange. The eyes of the crowd trembled violently. Many people began to blink desperately, thinking that their eyes were playing tricks on them. Jian Qiu saw countless afterimages of Luo Zian appear in front of him. He was surprised. Before he could react, he felt a murderous sword intent coming toward him. Then, he felt a sharp pain in his arm. He looked down and saw that one of his arms had been directly cut off. Blood was gushing out. At the same time, the afterimages in the void disappeared. Luo Zian's figure returned to her original position. She still had a strange smile on her face. It was as if she had never moved. Chapter 1484. The strange scene in the sky above the martial arts arena made everyone dumbfounded. Their expressions were blank, and they had no idea what happened. Jian Qiu's sword was fast. This was a well-known fact, but under the situation where he attacked first, he did not hurt Luo Zian at all. Instead, Luo Zian directly cut off one of his arms. There was also the strange scene that happened just now. Countless shadows of Luo Zian suddenly appeared in the air. It was really too strange. No one saw clearly how Luo Zian avoided Jian Qiu's attack, and no one saw clearly how she cut off Jian Qiu's arm. The audience fell into a dead silence. A pin drop could be heard. At this moment, everyone knew that Luo Zian was absolutely not arrogant when she said that Jian Qiu could not take her second sword. It was the truth. Luo Zian's strength was so strange that it made people tremble. At this moment, Nie Tian was also stunned. He did not see clearly what was going on. Even if he had the starry sky eyes and the holographic divine vein, he still did not see the whole process. He only knew that because Luo Zian's speed was too fast, her shadow appeared in the air. As for why her speed could reach such an astonishing degree, Nie Tian did not see clearly at all. In Nie Tian's view, this kind of speed was simply unreal. It should not exist at all. What a terrifying thousand clouds dark body. This woman can actually open the thousand clouds barrier without a sound. Really amazing. Just when Nie Tian was feeling puzzled, Sakra's voice suddenly sounded, and it was similarly filled with extreme surprise. Thousand clouds barrier? Nie Tian was stunned and shook his head. That's impossible. I didn't sense any barrier aura. Nie Tian's perception ability was amazing. He did not sense any barrier aura just now and did not know what the thousand clouds barrier that Indra was talking about was. You didn't sense it because the thousand clouds barrier was opened and closed for too short a time. You haven't even started to sense it and the barrier has already ended, Indra said solemnly. His expression was somewhat solemn as he said, "Nye Tian, this woman can open the 1,000 Clouds barrier. I'm afraid you are not her opponent." Disher Tian, hurry up and explain clearly. What exactly is the 1,000 Clouds barrier? Nye Tian frowned and said coldly. Since Disher Tian was an old monster from several tens of thousands of years ago, he definitely had some understanding of 1,000 Cloud dark body, so his words were still very credible. It was just that Nye Tian found it very strange. Why was this 1,000 Clouds barrier so strange? He actually did not sense it. Nye Tian, don't you have the primal chaos origin coffin? The 1,000 Cloud barrier is just like your chaotic original coffin. Sakra's low and deep voice sounded out as he reminded Nye Tian. Nye Tian furrowed his brows. In the next moment, he understood and cried out in his heart, the 1,000 Clouds barrier can control the flow of time. The flow of time within the primal chaos original coffin was only a tenth of that of the outside world. Thus, Nye Tian's cultivation time within the primal chaos original coffin was 10 times longer than others. Since the 1,000 Clouds barrier was similar to the primal chaos original coffin, it meant that it could control the flow of time. At this moment, Nye Tian figured it out in an instant. No wonder Luo Xian's speed was so fast. It turned out that she had more time. That's right. Sakra nodded heavily and said, the 1,000 Clouds barrier is the same as your chaotic original coffin. It can slow down the flow of time. According to my observation, Luo Xian only feels that the flow of time within the 1,000 Clouds barrier is only a fifth of that of the outside world. A fifth. Nye Tian frowned and muttered, in other words, Luo Xian's speed has increased by 5 times within the 1,000 Clouds barrier. Yes. Sakra nodded again and said, this woman's sword Dao realm has reached the sword bone. Even under normal circumstances, your sword might not be faster than her. If her sword speed increased by 5 times, you can only take a beating. Nye Tian swallowed a mouthful of saliva. His gaze couldn't help but sink as he said in his heart, the 1,000 Cloud dark body is actually so powerful. Luo Xian's sword Dao realm was the same as Jian Qiu's. Even though her sword speed wasn't as fast as Jian Qiu's, once she activated the 1,000 Clouds barrier, Jian Qiu would be moving in slow motion in her eyes. After understanding how powerful Luo Xian was, Nye Tian took a deep breath. It took a long time for his expression to recover. It seemed that the upcoming battle with Luo Xian would be even more difficult than he had imagined. However, he wasn't afraid. No matter what, he had to obtain the first place of the Lesser God Chief, because this was related to the Origin Earthstone. Nye Tian really wanted to know why the nets above snares below wanted to obtain the Origin Earthstone. What's going on? Are my eyes playing tricks on me? After a long time, the crowd finally reacted. Their faces were filled with astonishment. They had no idea what was going on. Even the holy judge and the others in the pavilion were staring at each other with their eyes wide open. They didn't know what was going on. Nye Tian didn't sense the existence of the 1,000 Clouds barrier. The holy judge and the others didn't sense it either. Because of this, Luo Xian's speed was strangely fast. It had practically reached an impossible level. No, impossible. This is absolutely impossible. Suddenly, Jian Qiu's voice rang out. His voice was filled with great panic, and he seemed to have gone a little crazy. He couldn't imagine how a person's speed could reach such a terrifying level. It completely surpassed his understanding of the martial path. Jian Qiu, I've already said that you won't be able to block my second sword. Luo Xian's cold eyes locked onto Jian Qiu as she said coldly, I'll give you 2 choices now. Admit defeat or die. As soon as she said the word die, Luo Xian's beautiful eyes flickered with endless killing intent. When Jian Qiu heard the cold and austere voice, it was like a bolt of lightning from the 9 heavens, causing him to instantly wake up. He seemed to have forgotten the intense pain of his broken arm. He suddenly raised his head and looked at Luo Xian with great fear in his eyes. He almost subconsciously said, "I admit defeat." At this moment, Jian Qiu finally understood that Luo Xian's strength had far exceeded his imagination. It wasn't that he couldn't block Luo Xian's second sword, but that he couldn't even block the first sword. If Luo Xian had wanted to kill him just now, he wouldn't even have a corpse left. Luo Xian looked at Jian Qiu and smiled coldly. "Jian Qiu, you are very lucky. I don't want to kill you. I only want to use you to send a warning to someone and hope that he will back off." A cold and calm voice rang out. Everyone's eyes immediately turned to Nie Tian. Many people had witnessed the feud between Nie Tian and Luo Xian. Even a fool could tell that the person Luo Xian was referring to was none other than Nie Tian. Nie Tian couldn't help but smile as he said loudly, "Luo Xian, you want me to back off, but I insist on going all the way. I'm determined to become the lesser god chief." Ling Rant's voice carried a strong sense of provocation, and the atmosphere immediately became strange. Luo Xian suddenly raised her head. Her beautiful eyes flickered with a cold light as she said coldly, "Nie Tian, I originally didn't want to kill you, but you insist on seeking death. I hope you can make it to the end and give me the chance to kill you with my own hands." "Luo Xian, I definitely won't let you down," Nie Tianling replied coldly. He had no intention of backing down. Chapter 1485. The battle between Luo Xian and Jian Qiu ended with Jian Qiu admitting defeat. This was an outcome that no one had expected. From the beginning to the end, although Luo Xian had only used one sword move, her terrifying strength had already left a huge impression on everyone's hearts. At this point, most people had already considered Luo Xian to be the champion of this grand competition. As for Nie Tian, although his strength was also strange, he was much weaker than Luo Xian. Next, the battle between Xian Wuhan and Yao Yan ended with Xian Wuhan's victory as expected. As such, the top three low god contenders were born. They were Nie Tian, Luo Xian, and Xian Wuhan. It could be said that, among the three, besides Luo Xian, the other two were shining dark horses. Xian Wuhan, in particular, had inexplicably become stronger, which made people speechless. Before the grand competition had started, Nie Tian had defeated Jian Chun, which could be considered as a sign of things to come. However, before the grand competition, Xian Wuhan had been a nobody. Then, suddenly, she stood at the same height as Luo Xian, Nie Tian, and the others. The following battles of the top three contenders were still decided by drawing lot. This time, Nie Tian didn't have such good luck. Good luck unexpectedly fell on Luo Xian. She drew empty and directly advanced to the next round. Nie Tian glanced at Xian Wuhan and breathed a sigh of relief. He did not want to meet Luo Xian so soon. Being able to fight Xian Wuhan first might not be a bad thing for him. On the arena, the figures of Nie Tian and Xian Wuhan appeared, facing each other in midair. Nie Tian, I did not expect that we would be opponents again. Xian Wuhan looked at Nie Tian and the corners of her mouth curled up into a strange smile. Previously, Nie Tian and Xian Wuhan had already fought, and Xian Wuhan had been defeated. Now that the two of them were fighting again, the situation was completely different. In the previous battle, victory or defeat had not been very important to either of them. Hence, both of them had conserved their strength. However, the battle before them would determine who would advance to the next round. Although both of them knew that they would have to face an even stronger opponent in the next round, neither of them would give up so easily. In this battle, no one would hold back their strength. Xian Wuhan, show me your true power. Nie Tian smiled faintly and the heaven-cleaving sword appeared in his hand. At the same time, sword will gushed out from his body and a sharp sword momentum soared into the sky. It was as if it wanted to tear the world apart. As you wish. Xian Wuhan smiled as well. Her beast bone overlord saber appeared and her saber will gushed out from her body. The powerful saber will rush towards the heavens and earth, wreaking havoc in the void. Boom! The blade force and the sword force collided in the void. With a loud bang, the two figures retreated at the same time. These two people are so powerful. I wonder who will be the final winner of this battle. Feeling the sharpness of the sword and saber, the crowd's eyes trembled violently as they exclaimed. Nie Tian's strength and sword Dao realm were inferior to Xian Wuhan's, but his demon essence and martial body were stronger than hers. Boom! At that moment, Xian Wuhan made the first move, preparing to seize the initiative. She slashed down with her beast bone overlord saber and the void shook. Suddenly, a tyrannical saber shadow appeared. It was thousands of meters long and the saber will surged like thunder. With the pressure of Mount Tai, it smashed towards Nie Tian. Starfire burning the sea. Nie Tian frowned and slashed out with his sword. A burning sword shadow whizzed out to meet the saber shadow. Boom! With a loud bang, the saber and the sword collided. The saber will and the sword will devour each other. The flames formed by the sword will actually gain the upper hand. The void was filled with a sea of flames, and it crazily pressed towards Xian Wuhan. In this attack, not only did Nie Tian integrate the sword will and the power of the stars, but he also added the chaotic flame, which stimulated the strong power of the starry sky ancient martial technique. Xian Wuhan frowned slightly and was forced to retreat, but he was not injured. He steadied himself in the air and smiled coldly. He said, Nie Tian, it seems that your strength has improved again. Do I need you to tell me that? Nie Tian laughed softly. Immediately after, the meteor wings appeared on his back. His silhouette moved and he stabbed out with his sword. On the sword's shadow, there was a surging torrent. It was majestic and surging, as if it wanted to devour everything. When Xian Wuhan saw this, he frowned again. Nie Tian's strength was too strange. His sword will seem to contain all the attributes. One sword was a flame, the other was a torrent. How could she know that Nie Tian's body contained many types of sword will? Furthermore, with the power of the stars supporting him, he could change the attributes of the sword will. For this attack, Nie Tian used the starfire devouring the sky. His sword will was infused with the soul-devouring sword will. He wanted to test if Xian Wuhan's spiritual sense was strong enough. Xian Wuhan laughed coldly and slashed out with his saber. Immediately, the saber-bone-frenzied beast roared and appeared. It was like a mountain blocking Nie Tian's fatal attack. Rumble! A loud sound rang out. The two figures retreated again, creating a distance of thousands of meters between them. The crowd could feel the saber will and sword will in the air. They were deeply shocked by the strength of the two. It was hard to imagine that the battle before them was between two lower gods. Following that, Nie Tian and Xian Wuhan exchanged a few more moves. Neither of them used their trump cards. But at this time, Xian Wuhan suddenly realized that his strength was slowly weakening. However, Nie Tian's strength did not weaken at all. It seemed to be growing stronger. What a strange sword will! It actually has a strong devouring attribute. Xian Wuhan immediately reacted. His eyes couldn't help but tremble. Nie Tian's sword will was too strange. Every sword could absorb the opponent's strength and transform it into his own. Furthermore, Xian Wuhan could feel that every time Nie Tian struck out with his sword, his divine sense would be impacted to a certain extent, causing him to feel uneasy and restless. I can't waste time with this guy. I have to finish him as soon as possible. Xian Wuhan suddenly realized that he couldn't fight a protracted battle with Nie Tian. Otherwise, the situation would become more and more disadvantageous for him. Thinking of this, Xian Wuhan's face suddenly darkened. Then, he stretched out his broken arm. Immediately, a majestic power was released and a new arm grew out. Seal! In an instant, Nie Tian felt a terrifying power of the seal spreading out. This caused his eyebrows to sink and his expression to change. Previously, he had guessed that Xian Wuhan's broken arm was not simple. Looking at it now, it was indeed so. Nie Tian, to be able to help me remove the seal of the four spirits, Even if you die, you should be able to rest in peace. Xian Wuhan laughed coldly. His entire body released a strong power of the seal. It spread throughout the space, causing the air to tremble slightly. When the crowd saw this strange scene, their eyes couldn't help but tremble. Who would have thought that within Xian Wuhan's broken arm, there would be such a strong power? Nie Tian's eyes narrowed. He used his spiritual sense to feel it, and his expression changed again. He felt a very terrifying power of the blood meridians from Xian Wuhan's arm. It was actually very complicated. It was as if she had multiple strong blood meridians. Chapter 1486. 4 Spiritual Bloodline. Thinking of this, Nie Tian's face couldn't help but darken. He had seen the 4 spiritual bloodline before. Ed, who was standing next to him, had the divine dragon bloodline. But for someone to have the power of 4 bloodlines at the same time, that was terrifying. Nie Tian, you didn't expect this, did you? I have the 4 spiritual bloodline. When Xian Wuhan saw Nie Tian's shocked expression, he couldn't help but smile cold. His eyes became even more murderous. The reason he had lost his arm was because he needed to use the 4 spiritual seal to seal the 4 spiritual bloodline. Otherwise, the power of the bloodline would be too strong for his martial body to bear. Humph! Nie Tian looked at Xian Wuhan and suddenly sneered. He said in a low voice, "How much power can you wield from a bloodline stolen from someone else?" Nie Tian didn't believe that Xian Wuhan had the 4 spiritual bloodline at birth. It was simply impossible. The only explanation was that Xian Wuhan's 4 spiritual bloodline had been stolen from another warrior. Stealing bloodline. When the crowd heard Nie Tian's words, they couldn't help but tremble. The way they looked at Xian Wuhan had changed. They were shocked and fearful. If Xian Wuhan's 4 spiritual bloodline had been stolen from another warrior, then this person was too cruel. At this time, in the pavilion high up in the sky, all the palace lords were looking at Palace Lord Qi Yi. They were clearly questioning him. Xian Wuhan was from the 7 Knights' Divine Palace. There was no way that Palace Lord Qi Yi didn't know that he had stolen bloodline. Palace Lord Qi Yi had allowed this to happen. His personality was extremely vicious. Palace Lord Qi Yi's expression was extremely ugly, but he didn't explain anything. He was innocent. He didn't know that Xian Wuhan had the 4 spiritual bloodline, nor did he know that she had stolen bloodline. If this had been any other time, Palace Lord Qi Yi would have killed Xian Wuhan personally. But Xian Wuhan was the 7 Knights' Divine Palace's hope of becoming the lower deity. Palace Lord Qi Yi couldn't kill this hope. So, he tacitly agreed to this matter. After all, it was the martial artist's own business to plunder the bloodline. Even if others didn't like it, they couldn't do anything. The world of martial artists had always been one where the strong preyed on the weak. Killing each other was a common thing, so stealing bloodlines was nothing. At this moment, the face of the heartbroken breaker prince was extremely gloomy. He did not believe that Xian Wuhan would be able to gather the 4 spiritual bloodlines on her own. Each of the 4 spiritual bloodlines was extremely rare. It was already difficult for Xian Wuhan to find people who possessed all 4 bloodlines, much less steal them. At that moment, the heartbroken prince thought of an organization, Reverse Scale. An island specialized in finding warriors with different bloodlines. If they wanted to gather the 4 spiritual bloodlines, it would be very easy. Therefore, the heartbroken breaker prince had a guess. Other than being a member of the 7 Knights' Divine Palace, Xian Wuhan had another identity. She was a member of an island. At the same time, on the arena. Nie Tian, you are very smart. Xian Wuhan smiled coldly and said, "My 4 spiritual bloodline is not innate, but it is more than enough to kill you. Is that so?" Nie Tianling smiled coldly, his eyes flashing with endless coldness. Since he knew that Xian Wuhan's 4 spiritual bloodlines had been stolen, it proved that she was not a kind person. Nie Tian did not need to show mercy. Nye, you have no idea how powerful the 4 spiritual bloodlines are after they are combined. It is your honor to die under the 4 spiritual bloodlines, Xian Wuhan said in a low voice. Her face was full of murderous intent, and her expression became ferocious. In the next moment, Xian Wuhan's entire body surged with a violent broadsword will. It actually merged perfectly with the 4 spirit bloodline in his body. Outside his body, a strange-looking shadow of a ferocious beast appeared. It was 3,000 to 4,000 meters long. The ferocious beast was covered in dense scales. Its face looked a little like a dragon, but also a little like a qilin. At the same time, it also had the characteristics of a tiger. On its back, there was a pair of huge red wings which did not match its black body. Nye, you will soon see the power of the 4 spiritual divine beasts. Xian Wuhan smiled coldly and took a step forward. Suddenly, a terrifying aura spread out and surged out like a tsunami. 4 spiritual divine beasts? Nye Tianling laughed and said sarcastically, I think it is more like the 4 spiritual divine beasts. As soon as he spoke, Nye Tian struck with his sword. The mighty sword shadow bombarded the 4 spiritual divine beasts, but the latter were unharmed. Nye Tian's eyebrows furrowed in surprise. The power of the 4 spiritual bloodlines was indeed strong. The 4 spiritual divine beasts took a direct hit from him and did not react at all. You want to defeat the 4 spiritual divine beasts with this level of attack? What a joke! Xian Wuhan let out a maniacal laugh as her silhouette sprinted forward. Instantly, the gigantic body of the 4 spiritual divine beasts rolled over like a moving mountain. Nye Tian felt a huge force coming towards him, forcing him to retreat. Nye Tian flapped his wings and retreated a few thousand meters. It was a pity that the 4 spiritual divine beasts were faster than him. In the blink of an eye, they were in front of him. Damn it! Nye Tian's heart sank as he realized that the situation was far from good. Die. When Xian Wuhan saw that Nye Tian was panicking, she let out a shrill cry, and the 4 divine beasts swung their huge claws. Cold light flashed, and a few beams of cold light appeared, tearing through the air to attack Nye Tian. Good. I want to see how strong your 4 spiritual divine beasts are. At the moment of life and death, Nye Tian suddenly let out a low roar. Immediately after, boundless crimson light surged out of his body, and a huge crimson beast actually appeared behind him. When it stood up, it was actually several thousand meters tall, and it was not the slightest bit weaker than the 4 divine beasts. At this moment, Nye Tian did not retreat. He used the giant spiritual true body, the 9 spiritual beast of chaos. Roar! The moment the 9 spiritual beast of chaos appeared, it roared. Its violent aura extended for tens of thousands of meters. The aura of a king was shocking. Bam! The next moment, the 9 spiritual beast of chaos waved its huge claws and collided with the 4 spiritual divine beasts. There was a loud collision. The 2 huge beasts paused for a moment, then separated and retreated. Xian Wuhan steadied herself. When she saw the huge red beast behind Nye Tian, she could not help but be stunned. She said, Giant spiritual true body? Nye Tian's figure leaped and landed on the head of the 9 spiritual beast of chaos. He said cold, This is the giant spiritual true body. Giant spiritual true body. Almost at the same time, the crowd exclaimed in shock. Everyone looked at the huge beast under Nye Tian's feet. They were stunned. They could not believe that Nye Tian had actually used the giant spiritual true body. After a martial artist advanced to the god state, the giant spiritual true body would basically be abandoned. Very few people would use it. Many people even felt that after reaching the god state, the giant spiritual true body was useless. Before reaching the heavenly Dharch realm, the main function of the primordial spirit was to absorb the spiritual power of heaven and earth. But after reaching the god state, martial artists no longer needed the spiritual power of heaven and earth. Instead, they needed the power of spirit. The ability of the primordial spirit to absorb the power of spirit was very weak. Martial artists mainly relied on the fiend essence and essence meridians to absorb the power of spirit. Therefore, after all martial artists advanced to the god state, they would give up the primordial spirit, not to mention the giant spiritual true body. At this moment, when Nye Tian was facing Xian Wuhan's 4 spiritual bloodline, he actually used the giant spiritual true body. Wasn't he courting death? Everyone looked at the 9 spiritual beast of chaos behind Nye Tian and seemed to want to laugh. Which god state martial artist would use the giant spiritual true body? But everyone also realized a problem. Nye Tian's giant spiritual true body was very terrifying. It actually blocked the attack of the 4 spiritual divine beasts. Chapter 1487. In the martial arts arena, the crowd's attention was focused on Nye Tian's giant spiritual true body. Gradually, their expressions became strange. They had never seen a person's giant spiritual true body be so powerful. Nye Tian's giant spiritual true body had subverted everyone's understanding of the martial Tao. What's wrong with the giant spiritual true body? Is there a rule that states that one cannot use the giant spiritual true body after reaching the god realm? Nye Tianling smiled coldly, looking fearless. He could feel that after reaching the god realm, the 9th extreme chaos beast had become even more powerful. Also, its ability to absorb divine power was very strong. It was no weaker than his supreme dragon bloodline. Perhaps this was because Nye Tian's primordial spirit was different from other martial artists. One had to know that the 9th extreme chaos beast could have its own consciousness. Nye Tian had even thought of letting Little Nine leave his primordial spirit space when the time was right and become an independent primordial spirit. Nye Tian, is this really your giant spiritual true body? Xian Wuhan suddenly reacted. Her voice was trembling as she asked, "Is there a problem?" Nye Tianling smiled coldly. His eyes revealed a look of disdain. He said coldly, "I want to see whether your 4 spiritual bloodline is stronger, or my giant spiritual true body is stronger." Roar. The 9th extreme chaos beast roared angrily. Circles of scarlet halos were released from its body. They spread out for tens of thousands of meters. It was as if it was declaring that it was the absolute ruler of this space. Xian Wuhan's eyes trembled violently. Immediately, a vicious look flashed in her eyes. Only now did she understand that Nye Tian's strength had far exceeded her expectations. Nye Tian, it's impossible to use your giant spiritual true body to go against my 4 spiritual divine beasts. Xian Wuhan roared. Her figure ran wildly again. Like a wild beast, she rushed towards Nye Tian. Nye Tianling laughed. He was not afraid at all. The 9th extreme chaos beast under his feet ran wildly. His body turned into a ball of scarlet flames. He was actually going to go head-on with the 4 spiritual divine beasts. Has Nye Tian lost his mind? Upon seeing this, the crowd couldn't help but exclaim, their eyes trembling. The giant spiritual true body was connected to the martial artist's bloodline. Once it was injured, the martial artist would also be injured. As far as everyone was concerned, Nye Tian's reckless charge was no different from suicide. But at this moment, Nye Tian was very determined. He wanted to see how powerful the 9 Supreme's chaos beast was now. Boom boom. The 9 spiritual true body, 9 spiritual true skills, 9 spiritual true, spiritual 9 body, 9 world, 9 dragon god. Tian. At this moment, everyone's eyes became lifeless. Their hearts were in their throats, afraid that they would miss this wonderful moment. 9. Tian Chi, spiritual true, 2 spiritual spirits, true, 9 and spiritual, the Chi world 2 spiritual Tao, the Tao, Tian Tao true, 2 spiritual, 1 true, the spiritual with Yen, spirit. The crowd above was tens of thousands of meters away, but they could still feel the surging shockwave. Many of the weaker cultivators could not withstand the shock waves and vomited blood on the spot. A collision of this magnitude was too frightening. It had the power to destroy heaven and earth. Nietian stood on the 9 extreme beast 9 chaos beast. When he felt the spiritual Tao true, he activated his star soul armor and blocked most of the impact. But he still vomited blood. Xian Wuhan, on the other hand, was covered by the 4 spiritual divine beasts. He was still covered in blood. He had not expected Nietian to be so crazy as to choose him to fight it head-on. Boom! After the spiritual Tao true, and the 2 beasts separated and retreated thousands of meters. The 9 extreme beast 9 chaos beast's body was covered in blood, but its red eyes were still bright. It looked even more violent and bloodthirsty. Nietian frowned when he felt the 9 extreme beast 9 chaos beast's aura. The 9 extreme beast 9 chaos beast was seriously injured. Although it was not fatal, it was very weak. Under such circumstances, if little 9 continued to fight, it would be very dangerous. At this thought, Nietian let the 9 extreme beast 9 chaos beast return to the chaos origin coffin. At this time, his eyes flashed. He looked at the 4 spiritual divine beasts in the distance. He saw a glaring crack appear on the 4 spiritual divine beasts' huge bodies, making them look even more ferocious. The 4 spiritual divine beasts, formed by the 4 spiritual bloodlines, were still very strong. They could withstand such a terrifying collision. Although the 4 spiritual divine beasts were fine, Xian Wuhan looked like he was in pain. He looked up suddenly and released the power of his bloodline from his arm. He wanted to heal the 4 spiritual divine beasts. Bam! However, at this moment, his arm suddenly exploded and turned into a pool of blood. The 4 spiritual divine beasts also disappeared. When Nietian saw this, he could not help but narrow his eyes. He immediately understood. Xian Wuhan's arm could not withstand such a huge force and had exploded. The stronger the power released by the 4 spiritual bloodlines, the more Xian Wuhan's arm had to withstand. This was the reason why he had sealed up the 4 spiritual bloodlines. His martial body could not withstand such great power. Understanding this, Nietian could not help but sneer. He said grimly, "Xian Wuhan, it's not your own power. Even if you steal it, you won't be able to use the power of the bloodline to its fullest. In the end, you'll only harm yourself and others." Xian Wuhan was stunned. His face was sheet white as he stared at Nietian in fright. He had no idea how to express his shock. Originally, he thought that Nietian would not be able to stop him if he removed the seal and released the power of the 4 spiritual bloodlines. He had never thought that Nietian would use the Titan's body and directly destroy his 4 spiritual divine beasts. All of this was just too unbelievable. It was completely different from what Xian Wuhan had expected. At this time, the wrinkled crowd was also stunned. They stared at Nietian with their mouths agape, as if they were looking at a monster. The overgods in the pavilion were all stunned as well. They were completely stunned by everything before them. It had to be said that Nietian's strength had exceeded everyone's expectations. In particular, the moment he used the Titan's body, everyone was stunned. At this moment, many people were pondering whether it was a wise decision to give up on their souls. Nietian had destroyed Xian Wuhan's 4 spirits bloodline, but he did not kill him. His gaze was fixed on the space not far from Xian Wuhan. He thought to himself, "Xian Wuhan, your identity is indeed not simple. You actually have someone secretly protecting you." Nietian felt that at the moment when Xian Wuhan's arm exploded, the void not far from him trembled slightly. Clearly, there was an expert lying in ambush. "We've been discovered. Leave." At this moment, a sudden voice rang out in the air. Afterwards, a black figure flashed by, directly taking Xian Wuhan away and disappearing into the air. The heartbroken Breaker and the others were still in shock. Only when they suddenly saw Xian Wuhan being taken away did they react. They wanted to stop him, but it was already too late. Nye Tian's lips curled up into a faint smile. He did not mind. Xian Wuhan's arm had exploded. The seal of the 4 spiritual souls had definitely been destroyed. Even if it could recover, it would take a very long time. Xian Wuhan, who had lost the seal of the 4 spiritual souls, was no longer a threat to Nye Tian. However, he was very curious. Just who was Xian Wuhan? Being able to gather the 4 spiritual bloodlines made Nye Tian think of an organization. Enai Lin. Xian Wuhan, are you from Enai Lin? Nye Tian shook his head and smiled bitterly. He did not think too much about it. Chapter 1488. Nye Tian didn't care too much about Xian Wuhan's identity, because he was about to face the most important battle, Luo Xian. Luo Xian was his biggest enemy in this competition. The final victor of the battle between Nye Tian and Xian Wuhan was undoubtedly Nye Tian. After Duguanai, Xian Wuhan was the second person to escape. The Holy Judgment and the Palace Lords in the pavilion looked at each other. Most people were looking at the 7 Knights Palace Lord because Xian Wuhan was from the 7 Knights Divine Palace. The person hiding in the shadows was very strong. He was able to hide from the eyes of the Holy Judgment and the Palace Lords. Just this method of concealment was very strange. Lord Holy Judgment, I really don't know who the person who kidnapped Xian Wuhan is. The 7 Knights Palace Lord panicked. His voice trembled as he spoke nervously. The heartbroken prince frowned slightly but ignored the 7 Knights Palace Lord. He had basically concluded that Xian Wuhan was from Enai Lin. The person who had rescued Xian Wuhan must be an expert from Enai Lin. It was not a big deal for someone from Enai Lin to sneak into the 7 Knights Divine Palace. Then, the crowd gradually calmed down. They were all looking forward to the final battle between Nye Tian and Luo Xian. Nye Tian had just fought with Xian Wuhan, so he had some time to rest and recover. After a while, he had almost recovered and was almost at his peak condition. Nye Tian, Luo Xian's strength is too strange. Are you really going to fight this battle? Emo Rushi came to Nye Tian's side and asked worriedly. She had seen Luo Xian defeat Jian Qiu with one move, so she still had some lingering fears. Although she was very confident in Nye Tian, Luo Xian was a terrifying opponent. In addition, Luo Xian and Nye Tian had a deep hatred for each other. It was inevitable that Emo Rushi would worry about Nye Tian's safety. Don't worry, I'll be fine. Nye Tian touched Emo Rushi's face and smiled faintly. His eyes were filled with absolute confidence. Although he knew that Luo Xian's 1,000 Clouds barrier was extremely terrifying, Nye Tian would absolutely not run away from this battle. He and Luo Xian needed to settle things, and the Origin Earth Primordial Stone was also something he was interested in. In order to understand the purpose of the inescapable net, he had to defeat Luo Xian and obtain the Origin Earth Primordial Stone. Actually, Nye Tian was a little puzzled. The inescapable net had many experts, so why didn't they just snatch the Origin Earth Stone directly? Why did they bother to make a deal with him? It was really strange. Grand competition of the 12 divine palaces of the shocking god realms, Low God competition's first place battle. Luo Xian of the cloud-splitting divine palace versus Nye Tian of the crimson moon divine palace. At this time, the green-robed old man's voice resounded, announcing the start of the final battle. In the next moment, the crowd burst into an uproar, and the entire arena erupted in cheers. Luo Xian! Luo Xian! Luo Xian! The vast majority of people were certain that Luo Xian would be the leader of the Lesser God sect. Their shouts shook the heavens and the earth, resounding throughout the entire Scarlet Moon mountain range. Amidst the cheers of tens of thousands, Luo Xian's figure appeared in the sky above the martial stage. Her entire body emitted a sharp and murderous sword intent, as if a sword goddess had descended to the world. Her beautiful eyes were filled with disdain. Seeing this scene, the corners of Nye Tian's mouth curled up into a smile. He then took a step forward, facing Luo Xian across the sky. Just like the cycle of fate, this pair of former lovers had finally reached the moment of life and death. At this moment, the two of them looked at each other. Their eyes were not filled with love, but with a strong murderous intent. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The two of them had yet to face each other, but an ear-piercing sound had already resounded in the air. This was the collision of sword auras and sword intents. Although Nie Tian was at a disadvantage in terms of strength, he didn't give in at all. After a long time, the cheers of the audience gradually weakened. Everyone's gaze moved between the two figures in the sky above the martial stage, and they began to discuss. Nie Tian's strength is very strange, but I don't think he's a match for Jianqiu. Even Jianqiu was defeated by Miss Xian's sword, so it's impossible for him to be a match for Miss Xian. That's right. If I were Nie Tian, I would definitely admit defeat. Luo Xian's sword is too fast, there's no way to defend against it. Just wait and see. Nie Tian will definitely be defeated by Miss Xian's sword in a second. Everyone was discussing unscrupulously. They were all certain that Nie Tian would lose to Luo Xian in a second, and he would be defeated in a second. In the sky above the martial stage, Luo Xian's beautiful eyes flickered, and she coldly said, Nie Tian, did you hear their discussion? I can give you one more chance. Take the initiative to withdraw and keep your life. You still have a chance to defeat me in the future. If you insist on fighting, your fate will be worse than Jianqiu's. Her cold voice revealed Luo Xian's domineering and arrogant nature. Apart from being cold, this woman was also very domineering and arrogant. Whether it was Jianqiu or Nie Tian, she had never put them in her eyes. Chance? Nie Tian raised his eyebrows, looked at Luo Xian, and laughed. Then, his expression turned cold, and he said in a deep voice, Luo Xian, I will create my own chance. I don't need you to give it to me. Luo Xian wanted Nie Tian to take the initiative to withdraw, and she even said that she was giving Nie Tian a chance. What a joke! If this was considered a chance, Nie Tian would rather not have it. Luo Xian's beautiful eyes trembled, and a cold light flashed in them. She coldly said, Nie Tian, since you are so stubborn, then don't blame me for being ruthless. In my opinion, your strength is even weaker than Jianqiu's. How can you fight me? Is that so? Nie Tianling coldly responded and said in a deep voice, Make your move. The crowd listened to the conversation between the two, and their expressions became strange. Their eyes burned, looking forward to the scene of Luo Xian killing Nie Tian in a second. You're courting death. Luo Xian completely lost her patience. She coldly roared, and a cold light flashed in her eyes. Her entire body emitted a strange and formless energy, instantly enveloping the space within 10,000 meters. Astral soul armor. Nie Tian faintly felt that his entire body was enveloped by a strange energy, and he immediately reacted. Astral energy gushed out from his body, and he directly activated the astral soul armor. A faintly discernible armored giant enveloped his entire body. I'll kill you with a single sword. Almost at the same time, Nie Tian saw Luo Xian's silhouette flash by, transforming into countless afterimages in the air. After which, a cold and murderous sword light whistled out, like an arrow released from a bow, surging towards him. Subconsciously, Nie Tian's absolute heaven slash appeared in his hand, but before he could even attack, the cold and murderous sword light had already blasted towards him. Bang! A muffled sound rang out, the sword shadow bombarded the astral soul armor, and Nie Tian's silhouette was sent flying. In an instant, Nie Tian felt a huge force bombarding him from all directions, causing his body to tremble slightly. While he was still in midair, he violently spurted out a mouthful of blood. In the next moment, Nie Tian frowned, and a pair of starlight wings appeared on his back. When fully spread out, it was 1,000 meters long, extremely dazzling. This time, he didn't use the meteor wings, but the astral soul wings. Who? With a flap of the wings, Nye Tion's body stabilized, and he stood upright in midair, but there was an obvious trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. However, his eyes were still firm and fierce. Cold stared at Luo Xian, and with a faint smile, he said, "Luo Xian, your sword is only SOSO. Chapter 1489. On the martial arena, Luo Xian looked at Nye Tian with a surprised expression, and she was puzzled and shocked. Her sword strike just now was extremely fast, but it had not killed Nye Tian. In fact, it had not even seriously injured him. In her opinion, this was almost impossible. When the crowd saw that after Luo Xian's sword, Nye Tian did not die and was still standing there unscathed, their eyes immediately trembled violently. Their expressions became sluggish, and their faces were filled with disbelief. The entire arena fell into a short period of silence. Everyone's gazes were fixed on the arena, and they couldn't believe the scene before their eyes. Luo Xian had severely injured Jian Qiu with a single sword strike, and she had held back. However, when she tried to kill Nye Tian with her full strength, she didn't even manage to injure him. It was too strange. Based on this, Nye Tian's strength was far above Jian Qiu's. In the next instant, the gazes of everyone were focused on Nye Tian. Seeing the astral soul armor and the astral soul wings on his back, they were all extremely astonished. They didn't know what kind of strange martial technique this was, to be able to block Luo Xian's attack. At this time, Nye Tian looked at Luo Xian. Although he looked indifferent on the surface, he was very shocked in his heart. Fortunately, he had activated the astral soul armor in advance. Otherwise, even if he didn't die from that sword strike, he would have been severely injured. Luo Xian's strength was very strong, exceeding Nye Tian's expectations. One must know that Nye Tian's astral soul armor was sufficient to fight head-on against a strength-type cultivator like Sanjin Ursha. Back then, when the astral soul armor clashed head-on with the 3 gold ores, Nye Tian wasn't injured at all. At this moment, he was injured by Luo Xian's sword. From this, it could be seen that Luo Xian's attack was even stronger than the 3 gold sands. The reason why Luo Xian had defeated Jian Qiu with a single strike was because Jian Qiu had been caught off guard. Nye Tian knew that Luo Xian's 1,000 Clouds barrier was extremely strange, so he activated his astral soul armor before she attacked. Initially, Nye Tian thought that with his astral soul armor activated, he would definitely be safe and sound. He didn't expect that he would still be injured. Not only did the astral spirit armor have a strong frontal defense, it also had a strong cushioning ability, which could greatly reduce the impact of various attacks. Even so, Nye Tian was still injured. Nye Tian, you are very smart. At this moment, Luo Xian had calmed down a lot. She looked at Nye Tian with a complicated expression and said in a cold voice, "You knew that I was very fast, so you activated the defense in advance." At that moment, many experts also realized this, and they all admired Nye Tian's wisdom. However, Nye Tian was able to survive because his defense was strong enough. Otherwise, he would have died. Luo Xian, I died in your hands because I was too stupid in my previous life. I won't make the same mistake twice. The corner of Nye Tian's lips curled up as his face revealed a determined look. I will not let the same person kill me a second time. Humph. Suddenly, Luo Xian let out a cold laugh and said, Nye Tian, I admit that your defense is strong enough, but how long can you keep it up? Will you still say the same thing when you run out of energy? Luo Xian believed that it was not easy for Nye Tian to activate such a strong defense. With his strength, he wouldn't be able to maintain this state for long. Once the astral soul armor couldn't be maintained, Nye Tian would still die. Nye Tian's gaze trembled slightly as he sneered, Before my strength is exhausted, it is enough to kill you. As the cold voice fell, Nye Tian's gaze turned cold. The astral soul wings on his back shook violently, and in an instant, endless starlight gushed out. Nye Tian stabbed out with his sword, and countless sword shadows covered the sky and earth. They actually connected to form a huge sword net of thousands of meters, bombarding towards Luo Xian. Nie Tian knew that Luo Xian's speed was extremely fast in the Thousand Cloud Barrier, so he could only use this kind of large-scale attack to test it out. Luo Xian looked at the sword net in front of her and sneered, "You want to hurt me with this kind of attack? Childish." As the sound of her voice fell, she took a step forward, and as her body moved, she left a row of afterimages in the space. Within the Thousand Cloud Barrier, Luo Xian felt that the flow of time was only 1/5 of the outside world. Imperceptibly, her speed increased by 5 times. Bang! Luo Xian's figure was like a sword, directly piercing through the sword net and directly bombarding towards Nie Tian. Boom! In midair, a mighty purple sword shadow bombarded the astral soul armor. A loud explosion sounded and Nie Tian's figure flew out. A glaring crack actually appeared on the astral soul armor. Nie Tian stabilized his body and spat out a mouthful of dirty blood. His eyes couldn't help but flicker and he said in his heart, "This can't go on. Luo Xian's speed is too fast. In the Thousand Cloud Barrier, I can't hit her at all. I can only take a beating. Moreover, she has the Thousand Cloud Dark Body. Her martial body is far stronger than ordinary martial artists. It's impossible to wait for the Thousand Cloud Barrier to automatically disappear. I have to break this barrier." Nie Tian's original plan was to rely on the defense of the astral soul armor to contend with Luo Xian and wait for the Thousand Cloud Barrier to automatically disappear. But now it seemed that this idea was too naive. Luo Xian's attack power exceeded Nie Tian's expectations. If he blindly defended, the final result would still be death. "Nie Tian, how much longer can you last?" Luo Xian's beautiful eyes flickered, and she smiled cold, appearing provocative and contemptuous. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, and his body trembled. A ray of starlight gushed out from his body, and the crack on the astral soul armor immediately healed. The astral soul armor could still block Luo Xian's attack, but it had to pay a huge price with the power of the stars. If this continued, Nie Tian indeed wouldn't be able to last for long. "I have to break the Thousand Cloud Barrier." Nie Tian's eyes narrowed as he stared at the void. Activating the holographic divine imprint, he carefully sensed everything in the surroundings. But the Thousand Cloud Barrier was very strange. This barrier was very powerful, but its aura was very weak. It was very hard to sense. "Nie Tian, why don't you try attacking the Thousand Cloud Barrier first?" At this time, Sakra's voice suddenly rang out, reminding Nie Tian. Nie Tian was slightly startled. He didn't quite understand Sakra's words. With his current strength, he had to first inscribe the holographic projection of the Thousand Cloud Barrier and find the weak point of the barrier. Only then would he be able to break the barrier. If he were to attack the barrier directly, it would be very difficult. However, Nie Tian didn't think too much about it. There must be a reason why Sakra wanted him to attack the barrier directly. Thinking of this, Nie Tian no longer hesitated. His body trembled, and an even greater amount of starlight gushed out from his body. A ball of starlight flames appeared, and at the same time, an astral shield appeared on the astral soul armor's hand. It was precisely the astral soul shield. This time around, Nie Tian's astral soul armor was completely activated. Astral soul wings, astral soul flames, astral soul armor, and astral soul shield, all activated at the same time. Amen. Luo Xian saw the transformation of Nie Tian's body, and her beautiful eyes couldn't help but flicker. After which, she smiled cold and said, "Nie Tian, it seems like your strength has exceeded my expectations. However, this won't change anything. Today you will die for sure." As the sound of her cold voice faded, Luo Xian's silhouette flashed, and the Thousand Cloud Violet Mist was unleashed. Purple-colored sword intent suddenly erupted. Dense and misty, like boiling steam, it condensed into a gigantic sword shadow that was a few thousand meters long, pressing towards Nie Tian. Chapter 1490. In the martial arena, everyone's eyes were stunned. No one thought that the battle between Nie Tian and Luo Xian would last for so long. The scene of Nie Tian being insta-killed by a sword did not appear. At this moment, in the eyes of everyone, Nie Tian and Luo Xian already had a feeling of being evenly matched. Boom! In the thousand clouds barrier above the martial arena, the purple sword shadow fell and bombarded the Star Soul shield. A loud bang resounded in the void, and the space trembled violently. Nie Tian felt a majestic and boundless force bombarding down, making his chest sink, and there was a feeling of almost suffocation. His figure was once again sent flying, and even his Star Soul armor began to sway. At the same time, the sword shadow that was stabbed out by the sword Absolute Heaven Slash also whistled out, blasting towards Luo Xian. Luo Xian's figure was agile as if she was flying. The tip of her toes just lightly tapped, and the sword shadow flew past her afterimage. In the thousand clouds barrier, it was impossible for Nie Tian to hurt Luo Xian. Boom! In the next moment, the mighty sword shadow bombarded the edge of the thousand clouds barrier, and a loud bang broke out. At the center of the impact, a wave-like energy ripple spread out. The entire thousand clouds barrier swayed in the void, and the rough outline could be clearly seen. Nie Tian, who was in the air, flapped his Star Soul wings and stabilized his body. He had no time to feel the injury on his body, and all his attention was on the thousand clouds barrier. At this moment, Nie Tian finally understood why Sakura let him directly attack the thousand clouds barrier, in order to let the thousand clouds barrier show its aura. Just now, he didn't think of hitting Luo Xian at all, just to attack the barrier. Nie Tian found that when the thousand clouds barrier was attacked, its aura would be significantly enhanced, and its shape would also be revealed. This was very helpful for Nie Tian to depict the holographic projection of the barrier. At this moment, in Nie Tian's divine sense, in the originally empty space, a rough outline of the barrier appeared, but the distribution of power on the barrier had not been depicted. Very good, as long as I depict the holographic projection of the thousand clouds barrier, I will definitely be able to break it. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth raised in a smile, but his face was slightly pale. After receiving repeated attacks from Luo Xian, the power of the stars in his body was consumed, and he also suffered some injuries. The situation was very disadvantageous for him. However, Nie Tian was very confident that as long as he broke the thousand clouds barrier, he could completely reverse the situation. Nie Tian, you're about to die, yet you're still laughing. You really don't know the danger. Seeing the smile on Nie Tian's face, Luo Xian's beautiful eyes couldn't help but tremble. With a roar, she slashed down with her sword again. The enormous sword shadow pressed down on Nie Tian like a mountain. Seeing the smile on Nie Tian's face, Luo Xian's beautiful eyes couldn't help but tremble. She shouted in a delicate voice, and the Star Soul shield turned into a shield, covering his whole body. Boom! Luo Xian was already a sword-bone swordsman, and her sword intent was very strong. Otherwise, it would be impossible for her to pose a threat to the Star Soul armor. Boom! With a loud sound, Luo Xian's sword directly left a huge hole in the Star Soul shield. Nie Tian's body trembled, and he spat out a mouthful of blood, but he still took the opportunity to stab at Luo Xian again. Nie Tian, you are too funny. Luo Xian sneered, and her figure directly dodged. She didn't understand why Nie Tian still made such a pointless attack when he had already consumed a lot of power. Not to mention that such an attack would not be able to hit Luo Xian. Even if it could hit her, it would not pose a threat to her. Boom! The next moment, the sword shadow bombarded the thousand clouds barrier, and the energy fluctuations became more obvious. The whole barrier was faintly visible to the naked eye. When the crowd saw the faintly discernible barrier in the void, they all gasped, not knowing what was going on. At this moment, in the pavilion high up in the sky, the Holy Judgment and the 11 Palace Lords frowned, and they finally understood. I didn't expect that Luo Xian could actually create such a huge barrier without making a sound. No wonder she could defeat Jian Qiu so easily. The palace lord of the Medicine King Palace, Yao Chen, was a divine alchemist, and his perception was stronger than the other palace lords. At this moment, he could clearly feel the power of the Thousand Clouds barrier, and he couldn't help but exclaim, "This spirit formation is very strange. It's actually silent. Perhaps it's because of the existence of the spirit formation that Luo Xian's speed can be this fast." Jian Wuya frowned and said with a sunken face. The other palace lords were also shocked. They had all underestimated Luo Xian's strength. "I am very curious, why did Nie Tian attack the barrier? With his strength, it's impossible for him to break the barrier. It's better for him to preserve his strength, and maybe he can hold on a little longer," the palace lord of the icy cold palace, Ling Feng, said with a strange smile. In everyone's view, the result of this battle was very obvious. Nie Tian was at an absolute disadvantage, and he was constantly being beaten. He was destined to be the losing side. The only suspense was, how long could he last? Nie Tian's defense was indeed strong, and he was able to resist a swordsman like Luo Xian. The other palace lords all agreed, and they all felt that Nie Tian's actions were too stupid, and he was basically digging his own grave. The heartbroken young master was the only one who was lost in thought. The Nie Tian he knew was not a fool. Moreover, ever since Nie Tian had participated in the tournament, his performance had shocked everyone. The heartbroken prince could see that Nie Tian was monstrous in terms of martial arts talent, sword talent, battle talent, and martial will. He didn't believe that such a person would waste his strength for no reason. There must be a reason why Nie Tian kept attacking the barrier. However, even the heartbroken prince didn't believe that Nie Tian would be able to break the barrier. Kaboom! Right at that moment, another loud boom echoed out in midair. Nie Tian's Star Soul shield was once again blasted open, leaving a huge hole in it. His body was already covered in blood, and his face was frighteningly pale. In everyone's view, Nie Tian was already an arrow at the end of its flight, and he couldn't make any more waves. However, at this time, the corner of Nie Tian's mouth curled up into a smile. In his divine sense, he had already engraved the holographic projection of the Thousand Clouds barrier. This is the weak point of the Thousand Clouds barrier. Nie Tian's divine sense locked onto a dim spot on the holographic projection, and his heart cold. Nie Tian, you can't hold on any longer. Obediently accept your death. Luo Xian saw that Nie Tian was still smiling, and this made her even more furious. With a roar, her silhouette flashed, and a violent sword slashed down. Kaboom! Bang! This time, the moment the sword shadow bombarded the astral shield, a loud explosion sounded, and the astral shield collapsed. Nie Tian's body trembled, and he was sent flying. However, while his figure was still in the air, the 9 dragon veins in his body began to operate crazily. Waves of majestic dragon energy filled the air, and a reddish-gold sea of lightning appeared. A giant reddish-gold dragon roared and rushed towards Luo Xian. Luo Xian's eyes trembled slightly, and she moved almost subconsciously to avoid it. Roar! The giant reddish-gold dragon let out a furious roar, and directly attacked the weak point of the Thousand Clouds barrier. Huh! Just as the giant reddish-gold dragon was about to hit the barrier, Luo Xian suddenly realized that something was wrong, but it was too late. Boom! Crack, crack, crack! A loud sound rang out, and the Thousand Clouds barrier shook violently. Then, endless cracking sounds rang out, and countless glaring cracks appeared on the entire barrier. The Thousand Clouds barrier is about to break. Seeing this, Nie Tian smirked, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. Chapter 1491. Crack, crack, crack. In the void, cracks appeared on the Thousand Clouds boundary. In an instant, it was like a spider web, and it spread uncontrollably. In the blink of an eye, the entire barrier was on the verge of collapse. It was as if it was about to collapse at any moment. Luo Xian was stunned when she saw the scene above her head. Her delicate face was filled with fear. She was extremely shocked. She did not expect Nie Tian to be able to see the weakness of the Thousand Clouds barrier. This was too strange. The Thousand Clouds barrier's weakness was hidden perfectly. Even Luo Xian had to use a lot of her senses to find it. Nie Tian was actually able to find the weakness of the barrier. This was beyond Luo Xian's expectations. At this moment, Luo Xian suddenly thought of Nie Tian's pointless attacks. She immediately understood. Nie Tian was activating the Thousand Clouds barrier's aura. It would be easier for him to find the barrier's weakness. Nie Tian, it seems like I have underestimated you. Luo Xian's beautiful eyes trembled. Her eyes were filled with killing intent. In the next moment, Luo Xian's body trembled. She released the terrifying Thousand Clouds dark power in an attempt to repair the barrier. However, it was too late. The Thousand Clouds barrier was too damaged. It could no longer be repaired. Luo Xian, don't waste your energy. The Thousand Clouds barrier can't hold on any longer. Nie Tian stabilized himself. Although his face was a little pale, his eyes were filled with joy. Damn it! Luo Xian shouted coldly. She already knew that the Thousand Clouds barrier could not be maintained. The crowd was completely dumbfounded. Most of them didn't know what had happened. The dozen or so overgods in the pavilion looked at the shaking Thousand Clouds barrier in disbelief. No one had expected Nie Tian to actually break the Thousand Clouds barrier. Why is this kid's senses so strong? This is impossible. Yao Chen was the first to react. He cried out in a strange voice. His voice became a little sharp. He was a divine alchemist. His senses were very strong. Even so, he could not sense the Thousand Clouds barrier's weakness. What was strange was that Nie Tian had actually found the barrier's weakness and broken it in one move. It was unbelievable. The other palace lords were stunned. Their eyes widened and they were momentarily speechless. At this moment, even the heartbroken young master had a look of astonishment on his face. The situation before him had exceeded his expectations. Bang! Just at that moment, a loud explosion rang out in the sky. The Thousand Clouds barrier was finally unable to hold on any longer, and it collapsed with a bang. Enormous Thousand Clouds dark energy dispersed from the barrier, and like surging turbid waves, it wreaked havoc in the space. A hint of a smile appeared at the corner of Nie Tian's mouth. With a flap of his wings, he dodged the attack of the Thousand Clouds' dark power and hovered in midair. In the blink of an eye, the Thousand Clouds' dark power dissipated into the air. Luo Xian leaped into the air and landed about 1,000 meters away from Nie Tian, her beautiful eyes flickering with hatred and killing intent. This was the first time someone had broken the barrier. This made Luo Xian extremely angry. Luo Xian could accept others breaking her ward, but she absolutely could not allow Nie Tian to do so. Looking at the furious Luo Xian, Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, Luo Xian, now that the Thousand Clouds ward is broken, we can have a head-on battle. In order to break the Thousand Clouds barrier, Nie Tian had almost used up all the star energy in his body. He had also used up a lot of his mind energy. This was a huge price to pay. However, after losing the Thousand Clouds barrier, Luo Xian's combat strength had dropped by several levels. She was no longer as terrifying as before. Nie Tian, you have angered me. Luo Xian's eyes were as cold as steel. Her beautiful face revealed a ferocious expression. She said in a low voice, Your strength and level of swordsmanship are below mine. Even without the Thousand Clouds barrier, you are still no match for me. She did not believe that Nie Tian's combat strength would still be so terrifying after suffering such an attack. Is that so? Nie Tianling laughed. He raised the sky-cleaving sword in his hand. His eyes revealed absolute determination. Arrogant! Luo Xian felt the disdain in Nie Tian's smile. She was instantly enraged. With a roar, the thousand clouds purple mist sword blasted out. Dense purple sword intent rolled out, and a huge sword shadow attacked Nietian. However, this time, Luoxian's sword was not as fast as before. Her movement speed also became normal, and there were no more afterimages. Luoxian, I want to see how strong your swordsmanship is. Nietian's eyes darkened. He said in a cold voice. The sky-cleaving sword pierced out. The mighty sword shadow roared. He wanted to fight Luoxian head-on. This Nietian is crazy. The crowd couldn't help but exclaim when they saw this scene. Nietian and Luoxian's swordsmanship were 2 whole levels apart. He actually wanted to fight Luoxian head-on. What a lunatic! Luoxian lost the Thousand Clouds barrier, but Nietian also couldn't use the Star Soul Divine armament. His defense and combat strength dropped by several levels. Boom! Under the watchful eyes of countless people, the 2 sword shadows collided. The void trembled, and suddenly, the dazzling sword light shot out 10,000 meters. The air was filled with a terrible sword will, as if it wanted to tear the heaven and earth apart. In the blink of an eye, Nietian felt a fierce aura attack him. He frowned and hastily retreated. Luoxian also frowned, but her reaction was obviously slower. She was hit by the sharp sword shadow, and a deep wound appeared on her shoulder. Her figure was also forced to retreat more than 1,000 meters. Perhaps it was because she was used to fighting in the Thousand Clouds barrier, but at this moment, outside the barrier, Luoxian's reaction was a little slow. In the exchange of swords, the 2 were equally matched. However, Luoxian was slightly injured, which undoubtedly gave Nietian the upper hand. When the crowd saw Luoxian injured, their faces revealed deep shock. This was the first time Luoxian was injured. No one thought that Nietian's strength was so strange and powerful. At this moment, the gazes of countless people became complicated. People faintly felt that the balance of victory had begun to tilt in Nietian's favor. Luoxian, your reaction is too slow. Nietian smiled faintly, extremely ridiculing. However, he was very cautious in his heart. After all, Luoxian's cultivation in swordsmanship was above his. If it were not for the fact that he had many kinds of sword wills, he would have lost in that attack. Damn it! Luoxian saw the smile on the corner of Nietian's mouth, and she became even more angry. Her whole body trembled, and she immediately shouted, Nietian, I want you to die. As soon as the word die fell, Luoxian's body trembled, and the purple sword will all over her body surged. It filled the air and covered the space of thousands of meters around her. Suddenly, the power of a matrix was released, and the space trembled. Sword matrix! Nietian's eyes narrowed slightly, and his pupils suddenly shrank. He immediately saw that in the endless sword will, countless purple runes were surging, appearing very violent. Without a doubt, Luoxian was completely enraged, and she opened the sword matrix. Chapter 1492. Nietianling looked at Luoxian coldly. His heart was already filled with killing intent. There must be an end between him and Luoxian. The next move would determine life and death. Boom! As Nietian's sword intent and blood chi kept surging out, the sword formation runes in the space became even more intense. A terrifying power filled the space as if it could annihilate everything. At this moment, if one observed carefully, they could clearly see that in Nietian's sword formation, besides the sword intent and blood chi, there was also a strange turbid flame surging. It was the chaotic flame. This time, Nietian fused the proud sword art's high divine sword formation with the chaotic flame and erupted with an unprecedented sword strike. At this moment, Luoxian's thousand cloud sword formation's aura also soared to the extreme. The black thousand cloud dark power and the purple smoke sword intent fused together, releasing a sinister and strange aura. What a terrifying 2 people! When the crowd saw the huge sword formation outside of the 2 figures, they felt a strong sense of oppression. Their eyes trembled and they cried out in shock. The intensity of the battle between Nye Tian and Luo Xian was beyond everyone's expectations. Originally, they thought that Nye Tian didn't have the strength to fight, but now it seemed that Nye Tian was the stronger party. Is the winner going to be decided? On the pavilion, Jian Wuya felt the aura of the two sword formations. His eyes suddenly sank and he said in horror. He was a swordsman, so he could naturally feel the terror of Nye Tian and Luo Xian's sword formation. Luo Xian's sword formation perfectly fused the thousand-cloud dark power and her own sword intent. It was very terrifying. However, Jian Wuya felt that Nye Tian's sword formation was even more terrifying. In addition to the stimulation of his own blood qi, which made the sword intent even more violent, he also fused the powerful dual flames. This kind of control and understanding of power was not something an ordinary person could achieve. Jian Wuya knew that he could fuse several different types of power together, but it was impossible for him to do it as perfectly as Nye Tian had done. In fact, the reason why Nye Tian was able to fuse different powers into the sword formation was not only because of his control and understanding of the powers, but also because of the power of the stars. The power of the stars was the origin of power. Not only could it evolve different types of power, but it could also help different types of power fuse perfectly. If he did not have the power of the stars, it would be impossible for Nye Tian to integrate the twin supreme flames into the High God sword array. PSSSD, PSSSD, PSSSD. At this moment, an ear-piercing sound came from the air. Before Nye Tian and Luo Xian made a move, the two sword formations had already collided with each other, and dazzling sword lights burst out in the air. Nye Tian, your sword formation is very strong, but it's a pity that your sword cultivation is too weak. You will definitely lose this battle. Luo Xian's eyes were filled with killing intent as she whispered softly, as if she was cheering herself on. That's not necessarily true. Nye Tianling smiled coldly, and the playful smile on his face intensified. Die! In the next moment, Luo Xian did not wait any longer. She roared, and her beautiful face became sinister and terrifying. Qian Yunxian slashed out with her sword, and countless sword formation runes condensed in an instant. A 3,000-meter-long sword shadow whizzed out, majestic and mighty, like a mountain or a sea. Kill! At the same time, Nye Tian shouted in a low voice, and similarly, he slashed out with his sword. The blood-colored runes in the High God sword array were attracted by the sword force, and condensed together. A 4,000-meter-long sword shadow rolled out, stirring up the clouds in the sky, and like a wild beast, it roared. Boom! Boom! The two huge sword shadows clashed in the sky, and the space violently trembled. At this moment, the heaven and earth became somewhat small. The crowd's eyes became scorching hot, and they stared blankly at the sky. Their hearts were in their throats, and they were looking forward to the next extreme collision. Rumble! Under countless gazes, the two sword shadows finally collided with each other. An earth-shattering sound rang out, and the space seemed to stop for a moment. Then, a sword wave that could be seen with the naked eye was released, and like a violent ripple, it spread out in all directions. Wherever the sword wave went, time and space became tense. The crowd felt the huge force, and many people could not help but retreat. Boom! When the sword wave hit the stage, a 1,000-meter-long deep ravine appeared, as if someone had used a huge whip to create a glaring wound. Boom! 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 In the next moment, the sound of an endless explosion rang out. The two sword shadows could not withstand it, and instantly exploded. An even more violent sword intent surged out. Nye Tian and Luo Xian's bodies froze at the same time, and they immediately felt an incomparably violent force pressing down on them. Nye Tian's face darkened, and the 9 dragon veins in his body instantly revolved, activating the dragon's scale shield. At the same time, he released the remaining bit of astral energy in his body, and the astral soul shield enveloped his body. Bang bang bang! In the next moment, endless sword intent blasted over, colliding with the astral soul shield, forcing Nye Tian to retreat again and again. The astral soul shield could not withstand the impact of the chi waves, and instantly collapsed. Nye Tian's figure flew out, leaving a dripping blood trail in the air. Looking at Luo Xian, her body was pushed back again and again, and she had no strength to resist at all. The crowd stared at the scene in a daze, but they could only see the sword intent rumbling endlessly, and could not see the two figures anymore. Nye Tian. On the spectator stand, Mo Rushi looked at the scene in the sky, and her little face was extremely nervous, very worried. If something happened to Nye Tian, she really did not know what would happen to her. After a long time, the chi waves in the sky gradually thinned, and the sword intent quickly dissipated in the air, and two figures slowly appeared in front of the crowd. Nye Tian stood in the void, his whole body dripping with blood, but his eyes were still firm, and his breath was still very calm. Fortunately, his martial body was strong enough, and the astral soul shield blocked the most powerful wave of impact, so he did not suffer serious injuries. It was just that his strength was almost exhausted, and at this moment, he was like an arrow at the end of its flight. And Luo Xian, who was 10,000 meters away, was in a much worse situation than Nye Tian. Her whole body was dyed red with blood, and her pretty face was badly mutilated, no longer recognizable as human. Only her pair of eyes, still flickering with a faint light, proved that she was still alive. Her martial body was originally not as strong as Nye Tian's, and even with the addition of her defense, it was still not as strong as Nye Tian's. At this moment, it was already a miracle that she was still alive. The scene in the sky caused everyone to suck in a breath of cold air. No one thought that the battle between the two would be so tragic. But looking at the current result, the winner was undoubtedly Nye Tian. Nye Tian actually defeated Luo Xian. This was an ending that no one had expected. High up in the sky, Nye Tian stepped out, and his divine sense spread out, feeling Luo Xian's breath. His eyes slightly cold, and he said coldly, "Luo Xian, everything between me and you should end." Nye Tian, Luo Xian felt the killing intent that assaulted her face, and her pupils suddenly constricted. She opened her mouth as if she wanted to say something, but before she could say anything, her body swayed and she directly fainted. She was like a withered leaf in a cold wind, drifting powerlessly. Seeing this scene, the killing intent in Nye Tian's eyes did not decrease. Between him and Luo Xian, it was destined that only one would live. For Luo Xian, death was also a kind of release. Chapter 1493. High up in the sky, Nye Tian slashed out with his sword in order to give an explanation to his previous incarnation. Hiss! When the crowd saw that Nye Tian actually made a killing move, they immediately felt a chill down their spines and their chests were filled with cold air. Nye Tian was too ruthless. He had already won, but he still wanted to kill in front of so many people. This would undoubtedly bring him the reputation of being cruel and bloodthirsty. Everyone only saw the surface. No one knew what exactly happened between Nye Tian and Luo Xian. That kind of unforgettable betrayal was definitely not something an ordinary person could bear. It was reasonable for Nye Tian to kill Luo Xian. Just as Nye Tian's sword fell, everyone's heart suddenly tightened, as if they could already see the scene of Luo Xian's body dying and soul perishing. However, at the moment of life and death, there was a sudden change. Whoosh! The moment Nye Tian's sword shadow fell, a sharp force came through the air and directly deflected the fatal sword. Nye Tian frowned. He felt an illusory figure flash past in the void. His face couldn't help but darken, and he bellowed in a deep voice, "Who is it?" His furious voice fell, but there was no response from the void. Boom! In the next moment, the void trembled slightly, and a strange giant hand fell. An irresistible mighty force hit him in the face, forcing Nie Tian to retreat again and again. Nie Tian's back trembled, and he retreated 1,000 meters away. When he looked up again, he found that Luo Xian was already gone. In front of him became empty, there was nothing. Everything returned to normal, as if nothing had happened. Damn it! Nie Tian's eyes darkened and he bellowed. His face became gloomy. At the most crucial moment, someone actually saved Luo Xian. How could he not be angry? That person's strength was very strong, and his hiding method was even more terrifying. Even with Nie Tian's perception, he only saw an illusory figure when he made a move, and then it disappeared. Nie Tian guessed that the person who saved Luo Xian was definitely not weaker than the hidden guards of the inescapable net. The sudden scene caused everyone present to fall into a deathly silence. Everyone was dumbfounded and had no idea what was going on. Nie Tian looked at the void and could only smile helplessly. He turned around and prepared to leave. The strength of the person in the dark was too strong. Since Luo Xian had already been rescued, Nie Tian was also helpless. Whoosh! Whoosh! However, at this moment, two piercing sounds suddenly rang out, and two sharp forces suddenly attacked. Pooh! In the next moment, Nie Tian didn't even have time to react before his knees were pierced through. Instantly, a sharp pain spread throughout his body, causing him to tremble uncontrollably. Bastard! Nie Tian's pupils constricted and he immediately reacted. That person hadn't left and was toying with him, wanting him to kneel in front of everyone. Son of AB*TCH, you injured someone I am interested in. Kneel down and admit your mistake. Just then, a murderous voice came from the void. It was extremely ear-piercing, like the sound of metal rubbing against each other. Don't even think about it. Nie Tian frowned and his eyes turned cold. He suddenly turned around and growled, "You cowardly rat, get the F***CK out." As soon as he shouted, Nie Tian's eyes darkened. He activated absolute confinement and an enormous amount of spiritual energy was released, engulfing the void. This was all his remaining spiritual energy. He staked it all on one throw to force the person in the dark to show himself. The void shook a little, and then a mocking voice was heard. Then there was a cold snicker. Little B** starred, "You sure are strange. Under these circumstances, you can still release such a powerful spiritual attack. How surprising!" As soon as the cold snicker died down, another air pierced through Nie Tian's knees and broke his kneecaps. This person's strength was very strange. The attack that pierced through Nie Tian's knees couldn't be healed instantly. Nie Tian endured the pain and straightened his back, showing no signs of kneeling. "Surprised my *SS. Nie Tian cursed. His eyes were bloodshot. He was at the end of his rope and his opponent was much more capable than him. There was no way he could resist. Little B***TCH, you can endure such pain. How surprising!" The ear-piercing voice was heard again. The next second, a cold voice said, "I will ask you again. Are you going to kneel or not?" The cold voice echoed in the void. Then, a bone-piercing killer's intent spread out and enveloped Nie Tian. It was obvious that if Nie Tian didn't kneel, this person was going to kill him. "I'll kneel to your mother." Nie Tian was completely enraged. He roared in anger and his eyes were filled with murderous intent. There was no fear at all. In this life, Nie Tian only kneeled to his father, his mother, and his master. Other than these three, he wouldn't kneel to even the heavens. Even if this person threatened him with his life, he would never make him kneel. "Young man, if that's the case, then go to hell." A bone-piercingly cold voice resounded in everyone's ears, causing them to feel as if they had fallen into an icehouse. Boom! In the next moment, a murderous palm shadow appeared out of thin air and slammed towards Nie Tian. This palm shadow didn't look very powerful, but it contained extreme murderous intent. Nie Tian stood where he was. His eyes were cold and there was no fear in them. "How dare you!" At this critical moment, a voice was heard. Then, a silhouette descended and angrily slapped out, blocking the fatal attack for Nietion. But immediately after, that figure was forced to fly out. While he was still in the air, he spat out a mouthful of blood. Sir, holy judgment! Nietion suddenly raised his head. When he saw the face in the sky, he could not help but cry out. The person who had intervened at this critical moment was the holy judgment, the heartbroken prince. I'm fine. The heartbroken prince wiped away the blood at the corner of his mouth, but his face was sheet white. The hidden person was so powerful that he had heavily injured the heartbroken prince with just a casual palm strike. After all, the heartbroken prince was a late overgod. Based on that, the hidden person was a peak overgod at the very least, or even an overgod. Everyone's gazes became strange and filled with fear when the holy judgment took action. They had no idea what would happen next. Everything that had happened had already exceeded everyone's expectations. No one had thought that there would be so many terrifying experts hidden in the darkness this time. At this moment, all the lords of the 12 divine palaces descended and stood behind the heartbroken prince. Even the lord of the cloud-crushing palace, Lai Yu, had appeared. The heartbroken prince was a holy judgment. If the lords of the 12 divine palaces did nothing to stop him, they would face the wrath of the holy parliament. People of the Yu family, move! A piercing voice rang out in the air. The person immediately recognized the heartbroken prince, but he did not stop. He actually wanted to kill Nietion. I am the holy judgment of this competition. How can I allow you to break the rules? The heartbroken prince said coldly. He did not retreat. Instead, he took a step forward and said coldly, "Let me give you a piece of advice. Stop right now, or you won't be able to bear the consequences of angering the holy parliament." The heartbroken prince knew that he was not the person's opponent, so all he could do was use the holy parliament to pressure the person and hope that the latter would be fearful. Chapter 1494. A cold, arrogant laugh rang out in the air, and an illusory figure appeared out of thin air. The moment the illusory figure appeared, the space around it trembled slightly, and everyone felt an almost suffocating pressure. Nietion raised his head to look at the figure, and his eyes darkened. A blurry silhouette appeared in front of everyone. They could vaguely make out that it was humanoid, and its body was covered in black runes. When the runes revolved, they looked like black feathers, releasing a strong oppressive aura. No one could see the person's true appearance. The person was like a dark abyss, hiding a huge secret that no perception could see through. The heartbroken prince's eyes trembled violently, and his face showed obvious fear. Only when facing this person did he realize that he was definitely not a match for the other party. Even if he and the 12 palace lords worked together, they had no chance of winning. Just sensing the other party's aura made him feel a deep sense of helplessness. He didn't even have the courage to resist. The 12 palace lords were also shocked, and they couldn't help but take a few steps back. Humph! The black-clothed man laughed coldly. It was extremely strange. His dark eyes flickered, and he glanced at the heartbroken prince. "I don't want to kill you, member of the Yu family," he said coldly. "Piss off!" As the deep and murderous voice fell, a majestic aura erupted like a landslide and a tsunami, pressing down on the heartbroken young master. Bang! With a muffled sound, the heartbroken prince's body trembled. He couldn't bear the pressure of the aura, and he was sent flying. He retreated 1,000 meters. The heartbroken prince wasn't injured, but his expression was extremely ugly. This person seemed to be afraid of the Yu family, and didn't dare to do anything to the heartbroken prince. The Yu family was one of the 9 great clans of the creation era, and the heartbroken prince was a direct descendant of the Yu family. His status was extraordinary. The person in question has left. What are you still doing here? Piss off. The black-clothed man laughed coldly, and with a growl, he actually forced the 12 palace lords to retreat. A growl that forced 12 over God's back meant that this person's strength was definitely at the level of a supreme god. Who would have thought that a mere competition of the 12 shrines would draw out a supreme god? There weren't that many supreme experts in all 9 realms. The crowd watched as the holy judgment and the 12 palace masters acted like children before the black-clothed man, unable to resist at all. The shock in their hearts could not be any greater. Everyone kept quiet out of fear, not even daring to breathe loudly. "Brat, kneel before me." At this moment, the black-robed man sneered. A black hand stretched out, trying to force Nyetian to kneel. It was as if he had to make Nyetian kneel, or he would not be satisfied. "Dream on." Nyetian felt a tremendous force descend upon him. His body could not help but sink, but his knees remained upright and he did not kneel. This person was obviously toying with him. He didn't directly kill Nyetian. Instead, he slowly increased his strength, letting Nyetian experience the most terrifying pain. "Stinking brat, if you don't kneel, then I'll make you kneel. I want to see how much longer you can last." A cold voice rang out, and the black-clothed man released an even more terrifying power. "I, Nyetian, would rather die than kneel." Nyetian roared madly. Brittle cracking sounds came from all over his body. The bones in his body began to shatter, and his whole body was dripping with blood. His entire body was completely deformed. But his eyes were still resolute, and his knees would rather break than bend. What powerful willpower! The crowd was greatly moved by the extremely tragic scene in the sky, and their expressions were somewhat trembling. The strength of Nyetian's mind was beyond everyone's expectations. Facing a supreme expert, he could actually remain so unyielding. It was truly terrifying. Once such a person grew up, he would definitely be unimaginably terrifying. Oh! Seeing that Nyetian would rather die than submit, the black-clothed man couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. He thought to himself, "This brat's martial body is so strange. The pressure I'm releasing right now is enough to crush a peak mid-deity. He's only a mid-stage low deity, but he can actually withstand it. How terrifying!" At this moment, the black-clothed man's gaze toward Nyetian gradually became complicated. Just now, he had asked Nyetian to kneel on the spur of the moment for fun. But now, he had to take it seriously. He had made up his mind to destroy Nyetian's martial will, so that the latter would develop inner demons and be stuck in the low deity realm for the rest of his life. Killing a peerless genius gave him a perverted sense of satisfaction. "Brat, aren't your martial will strong enough? Today, I will completely destroy you." The black-clothed man laughed coldly. His hoarse voice was like a death knell from hell, booming in the hearts of the crowd. Then, the black-clothed man suddenly released an even more violent pressure, determined to make Nyetian kneel. At this moment, if Nyetian didn't kneel, he would definitely be crushed into a pile of minced meat. The black-clothed man's strength was too strong. Even if he had the supreme dragon vein, the supreme dual flames, and the primal star stone, he still couldn't resist. But Nyetian's eyes were still unyielding. At this moment, what was revealed was not fear, but a bloody killing intent. He swore that if he didn't die, he would return the humiliation today 100-fold in the future. Nyetian. Not far away, the heartbroken child saw Nyetian's bloodshot eyes and couldn't help but shudder. It was as if he was seeing his past self. "I can't let him die." In an instant, the heartbroken child said in his heart, "The token of the Holy Assembly." With that thought, the heartbroken child no longer hesitated. With a low growl, he took out the token of the Holy Assembly. Then, blood spurted from his fingertip and flowed into the token. The next moment, a strange scene appeared. The token of the Holy Assembly suddenly released a ray of golden light. Then, a golden figure appeared, shining brightly and illuminating the entire sky. The sudden scene caused everyone's eyes to freeze, and they were petrified on the spot. Even their breathing stopped. Huh! At this moment, The black-clothed man suddenly sensed something and was stunned. "How dare you provoke the Holy Assembly? You're courting death." At this moment, the golden figure took a step forward and directly slammed his palm down. Immediately, an enormous and boundless force descended. Thousands of rays of golden light fell towards the black-clothed man. An elder of the Holy Assembly. Seeing the golden figure that suddenly appeared in the sky, the black-clothed man shouted in shock. Then, he slammed his palm forward. A black shadow appeared and pressed down like a raging wave. Boom! The moment the two palms collided, an earth-shattering sound rang out. Immediately, an endless amount of chi waves spread out. The golden figure frowned and released a golden light that enveloped everyone, protecting them from the impact of the chi waves. But the black-clothed man opposite him was directly sent flying. He spurted out a mouthful of blood, and his body retreated for thousands of meters. He looked extremely pathetic. The chi waves in the sky only dissipated after a long time. Countless eyes stared at the golden figure in shock. They didn't know who this person was and why he was so strong. The pressure around Nye Tian vanished, and his body recovered slightly. Looking at the golden figure in his hand, he was taken aback. This person had forced the black-clothed man to retreat with a single palm. His strength far surpassed his opponent. How terrifying! Chapter 1495. A soul doppelganger? Nye Tian froze when he heard the black-clothed man's roar. He hadn't expected the golden figure to be a soul doppelganger. No wonder he sensed such a strong soul aura from the golden figure. A soul doppelganger could repel a paramount god. It was hard to imagine how powerful the golden figure's true body was. The Holy Assembly was terrifying indeed. An elder of theirs was so powerful. The golden figure took a step forward and stared at the black-clothed man with eyes as bright as the sun and moon. "Since you know who this elder is, why don't you get the hell out of here?" The black-clothed man's figure flickered and turned to look at Nye Tian. He didn't want to stay, but he didn't dare to stay any longer. He turned and left. "Elder of the Holy Assembly, Thousand Feathers Black Crow, I will remember you. We will meet again." The black-clothed man's voice echoed in the air. He was declaring war on the Holy Assembly's elder. "Thousand Feathers Black Crow." The golden figure frowned and murmured, "So he's from Thousand Feathers Tower. No wonder he's so arrogant." Thousand Feathers Tower. Everyone was stunned when they heard the name. They finally realized the black-clothed man's identity. There were 3 mysterious organizations in the 9 major realms: Skynet, Thousand Feathers Tower, and Reverse Scale. Nye Tian had met both the Heavenly Dragnet and the Forbidden Scale sect, and this black-robed man was from the Thousand Feathers Pavilion. Nye Tian didn't understand why someone from Thousand Feathers Tower would be related to Luo Xian. Could it be that this fellow called Black Crow was only interested in Luo Xian? "Elder Yang." The heartbroken young sir took a step forward and bowed deeply to the golden figure. "I used the Holy Assembly's medallion for a reason. I hope Elder Yang won't take offense." The Holy Assembly's medallion wasn't just a symbol of a holy judgment. It could also be used at a critical moment to summon the Holy Assembly's experts. The heartbroken young sir had injected his blood into the medallion to send a message to the Holy Assembly. Fortunately, the one who received the message was Elder Yang Wu. The heartbroken young sir knew him and knew that he was a good person. If it was any other elder who came, they would inevitably be reprimanded and severely punished. Young Master Heartbroken had used the Sacred Assembly's token in front of everyone. This was a taboo for holy adjudicators. Unless it was a matter of life and death, it could not be used. "You Jiuxiao, tell me what's going on." Yang Wu furrowed his brows as he scanned through the crowd, eventually stopping at Nye Tian. Young Master Heartbroken Heart nodded respectfully and explained what had happened. "Oh!" Yang Wu was taken aback for a moment before he let out a laugh. He sized up Nye Tian with a strange gaze and said, "You actually used the Sacred Assembly token for this kid. I'm very curious." What relationship do you have with him that you would risk being punished for using the sacred assembly token? Young Master Heartbroken glanced at Nietian and said, Elder Yang, Nietian has nothing to do with me. I just feel that his talent and willpower are top-notch, and I can't bear to see him killed. I will bear all the consequences of using the sacred assembly token. Elder Yang, please don't implicate Nietian. Yang Wu was slightly taken aback. He seemed to have discovered something on Nietian's body. He actually laughed and said, This elder is not someone who doesn't know right from wrong. This matter has nothing to do with this little friend Nietian. Of course, I won't implicate him. However, I'm very curious. What is the identity of this little friend Nietian? As he spoke, Yang Wu's divine sense enveloped over, trying to sense everything about Nietian. Why is there a familiar aura on this young man? It's actually somewhat similar to Big Brother. After a moment, Yang Wu was puzzled. He felt a familiar aura on Nietian's body, but when he probed with his divine sense, this aura strangely disappeared. Nietian felt Yang Wu retract his divine sense, and let out a long sigh of relief. Luckily, Sakura had helped him conceal the aura of the God-fiend origin embryo. Otherwise, it would have been discovered by Yang Wu. The God-fiend origin embryo was currently in an active period and seemed to be about to awaken. With Yang Wu's perception, it was very likely that he would detect the abnormality. You're called Nietian? Yang Wu suppressed the doubts in his heart and looked at Nietian. Nietian nodded slightly. He was neither servile nor overbearing. Yang Wu's brows furrowed again. The doubts in his heart deepened. His surname is also Nie. Could it be that he is really related to Big Brother? Yang Wu had some guesses in his heart, but he couldn't say it out loud. The Big Brother he mentioned was called Nie Fenghua. If Nietian heard this name, he would definitely be very shocked because this was his father's name. Nietian learned from Yi Qinghai that Nie Fenghua was the Wind and Cloud Alliance's young alliance master. But he didn't know that the Holy Assembly's elder, Yang Wu, was Nie Fenghua's sworn brother. Elder Yang, are you all right? Nietian saw Yang Wu's tightly furrowed brows and his eyes trembled. He took a step forward and asked. He was very worried that Yang Wu would notice something. If the secret of the God-fiend origin embryo was exposed, it would be terrible. Nietian was overly worried this time. Yang Wu didn't sense the aura of the God-fiend origin embryo on him, but the power that Nie Fenghua left in his body to suppress the God-fiend origin embryo. But this power was very strange, and Yang Wu couldn't be sure if it really came from Nie Fenghua. I'm fine. Yang Wu snapped out of his daze and said with a faint smile, Nietian, since you're the champion of the lesser god realm in this competition, I'm sure you'll go to the god husbandry realm to receive your reward soon. I really want to be friends with you. If you're interested, you can find me in the god husbandry domain's Blue Dragon City. Nietian was taken aback. The realm of god shepherds? Only then did he realize that the reward of the Divine Palace competition couldn't be obtained directly. He had to go to another domain to receive it. No wonder the people of the nets above snares didn't directly snatch the Origin Earthstone. It turned out that the Origin Earthstone wasn't in the God Husbandry domain, but in another domain. Thank you for your kindness, Elder Yang. Nietian was very cautious about Yang Wu's excessive enthusiasm. He only responded with a smile, but didn't agree to Yang Wu's request. Beside him, the heartbroken child was also stunned. He looked at Yang Wu in surprise. He couldn't figure out the situation at all. Yang Wu was an elder of the Holy Parliament. Needless to say, his status was very high. It was extremely unusual for such a person to take the initiative to offer an olive branch to Nietian. Could it be that Elder Yang saw something in Nietian? The heartbroken child was puzzled, but he didn't dare to ask. In fact, he also vaguely felt that Nietian's identity was very unusual. He must have an amazing background. My friend Nietian, I'll take my leave now. If we're fated, we'll meet again. Yang Wu smiled faintly and bid farewell to Nie Tian. He was just a soul doppelganger and wouldn't exist for long. After bidding farewell to Nie Tian, his golden figure flickered and went into the sacred assembly token. After Yang Wu left, Nie Tian let out a long sigh of relief. It was a daunting experience, but not a dangerous one. He didn't plan to visit Yang Wu. The latter was too powerful. If he saw Yang Wu in person, he would probably be able to see through the divine demon origin embryo at a glance. That wasn't something that Nie Tian wanted to happen. After Yang Wu left, everyone looked at Nie Tian with a strange expression. There was actually a strong fear in their eyes. Chapter 1496. In the void, Nie Tian had already recovered, but his face was as pale as a sheet, and his expression was grave. After what had just happened, he realized that he was too weak. The person who had just attacked was a paramount god from the Thousand-Plume Pavilion. This person was called Black Crow. In front of him, Nie Tian didn't have the slightest ability to fight back, and could only be completely crushed. If it wasn't for the heartbroken prince, Yu Jiuxiao, using the Sacred Assembly's token to ask the Holy Assembly's elders to help, he might not even have survived. For Nie Tian, becoming a paramount god was something that was too far away from his current level. The dozen or so sect masters present were all at the Lord God level, but any one of them could easily kill Nie Tian. Strength, it's still strength. Without strength, I can't even protect myself, let alone the people around me. Nie Tian frowned and roared in his heart. He was too weak. He couldn't even protect himself against an expert like Black Crow, let alone others. If he was strong enough, how would Black Crow dare to force him to kneel in front of everyone? Fortunately, Nie Tian didn't kneel. Otherwise, he would have developed inner demons, which would be a huge hindrance to his future cultivation. Black Crow of the Thousand-Feather Pavilion, I, Nie Tian, swear to the heavens that I will return the humiliation today 100-fold, 1,000-fold. Nie Tian swore in his heart, but his expression slowly calmed down. Next, the heartbroken prince announced that Nie Tian was the lesser god champion of the grand competition of the 12 Shrine. There were no cheers, only looks of disbelief. Who would have thought that in this grand competition of the 12 divine palaces, the heavenly emperor's champion and the lower god's champion would be won by the martial artists of the Crimson Moon Divine Palace, who were the weakest in terms of overall strength. Nie Tian, go back and rest. In 3 days, I will bring you and the heavenly emperor champion, ED, to the god shepherding domain. The heartbroken prince looked at Nie Tian and smiled. Many thanks, Lord Holy Judge. Nie Tian nodded to express his gratitude. Without any hesitation, he flashed into action and arrived at Emo Rushi's side. Nie Tian. Emo Rushi saw that Nie Tian had arrived, but there were faint traces of tears on her delicate face. The scene just now was too dangerous, and she didn't even dare to continue watching. I'm sorry for making you worry. Nie Tian took a step forward and gently pulled Emo Rushi into his arms with a guilty look on his face. He knew that when he was in danger, Emo Rushi would definitely be very worried and even more distressed than him. By the time Emo Rushi had calmed down, Nie Tian had already left. A moment later, he and Emo Rushi returned to the small courtyard. At this time, Cher was still cultivating in her room. She had no idea what had happened to Nie Tian. Sir. Seeing that Nie Tian and Emo Rushi had returned, Nie Qiu was extremely happy. Nie Tian had asked him to stay by Cher's side, but he still didn't know that Nie Tian had already become the lesser god chief. Nie Qiu, it's been hard on you. Nie Tian smiled faintly and nodded. Immediately, Nie Tian told Nie Qiu about what had happened in the martial arena. Although Nie Qiu didn't see it personally, he could imagine how dangerous the situation was just based on Nie Tian's description. Following that, Nie Tian entered his room and began to recover his strength. 3 days later, he and ED would follow the heartbroken prince to the god shepherding domain. He was very curious about what the God-shepherding domain would be like. In the room, Nye Tian sat cross-legged and circulated the 9 extremes war god art. His aura gradually recovered. After the battle with Luo Xian, Nye Tian understood how terrifying the astral soul armor was. If he didn't have the astral soul armor, he wouldn't be a match for Luo Xian. Within the Thousand Clouds formation, Luo Xian's speed and battle prowess had increased greatly. With the support of the astral soul armor, Nye Tian could create a holographic projection of the Thousand Clouds formation. Luo Xian was taken away by Black Crow from the Thousand Feathers Pavilion. I wonder if Black Crow already knew Luo Xian, or if he just wanted to save her. After recovering some of his strength, Nye Tian's heart was in a mess. Black Crow was a paramount god. If he was interested in Luo Xian and took her as a disciple, it would be terrible. However, Nye Tian wasn't too afraid of Luo Xian now. He had already created a holographic projection of the Thousand Clouds formation. If he encountered Luo Xian again, he would be able to quickly find the weakness of the Thousand Clouds formation and break it. Without the Thousand Clouds formation, Luo Xian wasn't a threat to Nye Tian. Thinking of this, Nye Tian gradually calmed down and focused on recovering his strength. 2 days later, Nye Tian walked out of his room. His body had fully recovered, and his aura was much stronger than before. After 2 days of bitter cultivation, Nye Tian had not only recovered from his injuries, but his strength had also increased to the late-stage Lesser God realm. It had only been a few months since he arrived at the God Awakening Realmverse, but he had already reached the late-stage Lesser God realm from the peak of Heavenly Emperor realm. One had to know that even the top geniuses of the Realmverse would need decades or even centuries to achieve such a feat. Nye Tian knew that the reason his strength had improved so quickly was related to his martial constitution. His godhead was devil essence, his vital meridians were the supreme dragon meridians, and his origin spirit was a 9th-ranked chaos beast. Not only that, he also had the twin paragon flames, and the extremely mysterious primal star stone. With so many freakish items fused together, and the primal chaos origin coffin, Nye Tian's strength improved so quickly. Nye Tian had a vague feeling that the primal star stone was the main reason why his strength improved so quickly. The power of stars contained in the primal star stone could accelerate the conversion of all kinds of energy. It could also absorb all kinds of attributes of heaven and earth, yuan qi and bright spirit energy. The power of stars that is known as the origin of force is indeed strange. The corners of Nye Tian's mouth curled up as he muttered to himself. Until now, he still did not know what the primal starstone was, nor did he know what kind of energy the power of stars was. However, he could feel that the power of stars was definitely a higher grade energy than the bright spirit energy. At this time, Nye Tian's body shook slightly. A layer of nearly transparent battle armor appeared around his body. It looked like a hurricane whirlpool. It was extremely strange. The 9 extremes war god art, I have finally cultivated to the 6th stage of the extreme wind firmament realm. The corners of Nye Tian's mouth curled into a satisfied smile as he felt the extreme wind firmament battle armor around his body. The 9 extremes war god art was a martial art technique that Nye Tian obtained in the Dark Night Stupa Mountain, a forbidden area of the heaven realm. Nye Tian did not know the grade of the 9 extremes war god art. In his previous life, when he had the strength of a peak heavenly emperor, he had only cultivated the 9 extremes war god art to the 5th stage, the extreme earth profound sky realm. Now that his strength had reached the late stage low god realm, he had finally cultivated the 9 extremes war god art to the 6th stage, the extreme wind firmament realm. However, he was still a long way from reaching the 9th stage of the extreme twilight sky realm. When the 9 extremes war god art reached the 9th stage, Nye Tian would be able to achieve the mighty body of the war god. Nye Tian could feel that the extreme wind firmament battle armor was much stronger than the extreme earth profound sky battle armor. Moreover, the power of the wind attribute would greatly enhance his speed. Chapter 1497. When Ye Tian walked out of his room, he happened to see Emo Rushi and Cher walking towards him. When Ye Tian's gaze swept across Cher's body, he couldn't help but shudder violently. It had only been a few days, but Cher's strength had already reached early-stage mid-god realm. The sword aura around her seemed to have grown noticeably stronger, and it seemed as though her swordsmanship realm had also improved. Nye Tian, Sister Rushi said that someone forced you to kneel. Is that true? Cher put on an angry face when she saw Nye Tian. It's all in the past. I'm fine, Nye Tian put on a faint smile. He didn't forget about Black Crow, but he would handle this matter himself. At this moment, Emo Rushi stepped forward and pulled Cher. The latter nodded and didn't ask any more questions. Cher, what's your current strength? Nye Tian's eyes flickered and he suddenly asked. Early stage mid-god, essence of sword realm, Cher nodded. She didn't conceal anything and answered earnestly. As expected. Nye Tian was astonished. Cher's strength had improved far beyond his expectation. Perhaps, her current battle strength was comparable to a high god expert. Shui was simply too terrifying. Even Ye Tian couldn't help but feel ashamed of his own inferiority. Cher, let's have a spar. At this moment, Nye Tian's eyes flickered and he said with a sly look. You want to fight me? Shui curled her delicate lips as her gaze flashed across Nye Tian's face, disdain filling her face. Nye Tian was speechless. He had no choice but to say, just a casual spar. All right. Cher giggled. She turned to Emo Rushi and said, Sister Rushi, don't blame me if Cher defeats Nye Tian. Emo Rushi's face darkened. She nodded and smiled. A short while later, Nye Tian and the other two arrived at a valley. Nye Tian and Cher's figures flashed and they leaped into the sky. Nye Tian, be careful. Shui-er's eyes flickered and she laughed. The god-slaying sword appeared in her hand and she unleashed all of her sword force. Her entire being turned into a gigantic sword that could split the heavens. It was as if the god of swords had descended upon the mortal realm, domineering and sharp. Essence of sword, a swordsman is indeed terrifying. Nye Tian murmured as he sensed the sword aura around Cher. He wanted to spar with Cher because he wanted to know how powerful a swordsman with the essence of sword was. Shui-er's sword Dao realm was much higher than his. He wanted to make use of Shui-er's sword intent to comprehend the sword Dao and see if he could make use of this opportunity to break through to the sword vein realm. Since Cher's swordsmanship realm was much higher than his, he wanted to use Cher's sword will to comprehend swordsmanship and see if he could use it to break through to the sword vein realm. Cher, make your move. Nye Tian smiled faintly. Of course, he was not worried that Cher would hurt him. All right. With a laugh, Shui thrust her long sword forward. Blood-red sword intent spread out and bore down on Nye Tian like a bottomless pit of blood. Nye Tian did not dare to be careless. He immediately activated the extreme wind heavenly armor. At the same time, he stabbed out with his sword. The surging sword will condensed into a mighty sword shadow and whistled out. Boom! The two swords collided with a loud sound. The sword radiance shot out for thousands of meters and the endless sword will wreaked havoc in the space. Nye Tian sensed a fierce aura coming at him. He tried to dodge, but was still hit, and was forced to retreat several hundred meters. What a sharp sword will! Nye Tian stabilized himself. Seeing the glaring crack on the extreme wind heavenly armor, he could not help but shake his head and smile bitterly. Of course, he knew that Cher had intentionally suppressed her strength. Otherwise, his extreme wind heavenly armor would not have been able to block that attack. Cher was too terrifying. The current Nye Tian was far from being her match. Then, Nye Tian and Cher exchanged a few more blows. With each blow, there would be an additional crack on Nye Tian's armor. After a few blows, the extreme wind heavenly armor was on the verge of collapse. It seemed like it would shatter at the next moment. However, Schwerer was very smart. She knew what Nye Tian was trying to do. Sword intent surged out of her, but she didn't do much damage. She wanted Nye Tian to comprehend the quintessence of the sword and the sword intent of a swordsman. Nye Tian had the galaxy sword formation in his body. He had unintentionally absorbed some of Cher's sword will, which had a subtle effect on his own sword will. Nye Tian could vaguely feel that the sword pattern in his body was slowly condensing, as though it was going to merge with the meridians in his body. However, he failed after a few attempts. It was obvious that Nye Tian was still not strong enough to advance to the sword vein realm. Sword of the setting sun. At this moment, Cher smiled faintly and stabbed her sword. A massive crimson sword will blasted out like the setting sun, surging towards Nye Tian. Nye Tian could feel the majestic aura in the sword will. He smiled bitterly and stabbed out with the sword absolute heaven slash. However, before the sword shadow could condense, the sword will was crushed by the pressure. Bang! With a loud explosion, Nye Tian's extreme wind firmament armor shattered, and he was sent flying. Nye Tian stabilized his body in midair. He was not injured, but he looked extremely helpless. He smiled bitterly and said, "Cher, you are too strong. I admit defeat." Schwerer smiled proudly. Her figure flashed and landed beside Emo Rushi. She said, "Sister Rushi," he asked for it. "Don't blame me." Emo Rushi could not help but laugh and said, "Cher is so powerful. This is the first time I have seen Nye Tian admit defeat." Of course. Cher raised her snow-white chin like a proud princess. Although Nye Tian had a helpless look on his face, he was very happy inwardly. After fighting with Cher, his understanding of the godly state sword principle had improved. He believed that it would not be long before he could advance to the sword vein realm. "I need to increase my strength as soon as possible." Looking at the two girls in front of him, Nye Tian's eyes became firm. He wanted to protect them. He was not as strong as Cher now, but it did not mean that he would not be able to do so in the future. Nye Tian believed that it would not take long for his strength to catch up to Cher, or even surpass her, because he could feel that the Godfiend origin embryo was becoming more and more active, showing signs of awakening. It seemed like it would awaken soon. The Godfiend origin embryo was the first of the 9 great ancient taboos. He wondered what kind of changes it would bring to Nye Tian after awakening. "Rushi, Cher, let's go back." Nye Tian saw that it was getting late and prepared to leave. "Mister, you are here." At this moment, a figure appeared in a hurry. It was Niechio. "Niechio, what happened?" Nye Tian saw that Niechio was in a rush, and frowned as he asked. "Mister, the Scarlet Moon Empress is looking for you. She said that she has something to discuss with you." Niechio looked at Nye Tian with a nervous expression. "Chi Yefeng is looking for me?" Nye Tian's eyes narrowed. He did not know why Chi Yefeng was looking for him. "I will be leaving with Lord Holy Judgment tomorrow. For Chi Yefeng to look for me at this time, it must not be for anything good." Nye Tian guessed. He then asked Niechio and the rest to leave while he went to see Chi Yefeng. "Nye Tian, be careful." Emo Rushi warned Nye Tian before leaving with Niechio and Cher. Chapter 1498. After a while, Nye Tian's figure appeared outside the Crimson Moon Palace. Before he entered the palace, he could already see Chi Yefeng and Sangyu from afar. Although he was confused, Nye Tian still quickly entered the palace. He knew that Chi Yefeng wasn't a kind person, but since Chi Yefeng knew his identity, he wouldn't dare to do anything to him. "Nye Tian, you're here." Chi Yefeng smiled kindly upon seeing Nye Tian, as if he were completely harmless to humans and animals. Nye Tian nodded slightly and went straight to the point. "Sect Master, Elder Tsang, what can I do for you?" Chi Yefeng's face stiffened slightly, then he forced a smile and said, "Nye Tian, you're going to the God Husbandry territory with Lord Holy Judge tomorrow. This is a huge opportunity for you." "Huge opportunity?" Nie Tian was slightly stunned, not understanding what Qi Yifeng meant. Qi Yifeng glanced at Song Yu and signaled him to explain. Song Yu coughed and took a step forward, saying, Nie Tian, you already know. The world we're in now is divided into 3 lower realms, 3 middle realms, and 3 upper realms. The God Husbandry territory is one of the lower realms. The God Husbandry territory that you're going to next is one of the middle realms. The reward for the grand competition of the 12 Shrine is in the Holy Assembly's branch in the God Husbandry territory. Hearing this, Nie Tian couldn't help but be stunned. So the Origin Earthstone was in the Holy Assembly's branch. No wonder the inescapable net didn't dare to rob it and could only make a deal with him. After seeing the strength of the Holy Assembly's elder last time, Nie Tian had some understanding of the Holy Assembly's strength. It was definitely a very terrifying force. And then, Nie Tian glanced at Song Yu and asked. Song Yu nodded and continued, this time, the 2 leaders of the God Husbandry territory are not the only ones going to the God Husbandry territory. There are also leaders from the other 3 lower realms, the Spirit God territory and the Flame Heaven territory. At that time, the 6 leaders of the 3 realms will also compete. The winner will receive more generous rewards and even have the chance to directly join the Holy Assembly. Song Yu's eyes couldn't help but twinkle as he said this. The Holy Assembly was a great temptation for all warriors. It was a holy land in their hearts. Many warriors set joining the Holy Assembly as their lifelong goal. However, not everyone could join the Holy Parliament. In addition to outstanding talent and perseverance, many people also needed a considerable background. For example, the heartbroken Prince Yu Jiuxiao. If he wasn't a member of the Yu family, he wouldn't have been able to enter the Holy Parliament. However, Nie Tian's trip to the Divine Shepherd realm was different. This was an opportunity that only depended on talent, not background. As long as one's talent was high enough, they would be able to join the Holy Parliament. Once they joined the Holy Assembly, they could basically do whatever they wanted in the 9 realms. Nie Tian glanced at Song Yu. Feeling the passion in Song Yu's eyes, he smiled casually. As it turned out, the other 2 realms, the Spirit God realm and the Flame Heaven realm, were also holding similar competitions while the competition of the 12 divine palaces was going on, and the Heaven Flame realm and the Heaven Flame realm had also chosen the champion of the Heaven Emperor and the Lesser God realm. The 6 leaders of the 3 lower realms would enter the God Husbandry territory with their respective holy judges to receive their rewards. At the same time, they could also compete with each other to show their strength and fight for the chance to join the Holy Assembly. This kind of matter had a great attraction to all martial artists. Unfortunately, Nie Tian wasn't interested. He didn't want to join the Holy Assembly. Nie Tian, you don't want to join the Holy Assembly? Qi Yifeng and Song Yu exclaimed at the same time when they saw Nie Tian's indifferent and uninterested face. Nie Tian shook his head and said indifferently, not interested. This. Qi Yifeng and Song Yu were stunned and couldn't say a word for a long time. Joining the Holy Assembly was the dream of many people. Now that Nie Tian had such an opportunity, he didn't care about it at all. It was really infuriating. Qi Yifeng thought that if he had the opportunity to join the Holy Assembly, the palace master would immediately quit. Unfortunately, he didn't have such an opportunity. Previously, Yang Wu, an elder of the Holy Assembly, had thrown an olive branch to Nie Tian. As long as Nie Tian went to visit him, he would definitely join the Holy Assembly. However, to everyone's surprise, Nie Tian wasn't interested. Nie Tian, you might not know much about the Holy Assembly. As long as you join the Holy Assembly. Song Yu was afraid that Nie Tian didn't know about the Holy Assembly's strength and hurriedly tried to explain. However, he was interrupted by Nie Tian. Elder Tsang, I'm really not interested in the Holy Assembly. I followed Lord Holy Judge into the God Husbandry domain to get my reward. That's all. Nie Tian waved his hand and looked at Song Yu indifferently. He entered the god husbandry domain for the origin earth stone. He really wanted to know why the inescapable net desired the origin earth stone so much. Tian wanted to use the origin earth stone to find out the relationship between Cher and the inescapable net. This was what he wanted to do the most at the moment. He really didn't want to do anything else. Song Yu's face darkened, and he was speechless for a moment. Tian, it's fine if you don't want to join the Holy Assembly. Perhaps the Red Moon Divine Palace is more suitable for you. Qi Yifeng came back to his senses and laughed. Tian raised his eyebrows and looked at Qi Yifeng. He didn't say anything. Actually, both he and Qi Yifeng were well aware that the two of them were just making a deal. He would become the Lesser God Chief and help the Crimson Moon Divine Palace retain its position as the Divine Palace, while Qi Yifeng would guarantee the safety of the Heaven Realm's divine domain. Lord Palace Master, Elder Tsang, if there's nothing else, I'll take my leave first. Tian didn't want to talk nonsense with Qi Yifeng and said indifferently, Tian, please wait. Qi Yifeng couldn't help but become nervous when he saw Tian was about to leave. He immediately stopped Tian. Lord Palace Master, is there anything else? Tian turned around and looked at Qi Yifeng with an indifferent expression. Qi Yifeng's expression stiffened slightly. He hesitated for a moment before saying, Tian, do you know what the Holy Assembly will reward the Lesser God Chief? Tian was slightly stunned. His eyes flickered and he said, I heard it's a piece of origin earth stone. Why? Lord Palace Master is also interested in the origin earth stone? Qi Yifeng's eyes were burning with greed. He was obviously interested in the origin earth stone. Tian, I'm indeed very interested in the origin earth stone. I wonder if you can give it to me. Qi Yifeng's eyes were burning as he said, I won't take your origin earth stone for free. Just tell me what you want. As long as I can do it, I'll definitely do it. Tian looked at Qi Yifeng's greedy eyes and frowned. He was even more puzzled. The inescapable net wanted the origin earth stone, and Qi Yifeng also wanted the origin earth stone. Could there really be a secret hidden within the origin earth stone? If Heaven and Earth Net had obtained some information, it would be normal. Qi Yifeng was just a palace master. Did he know something? Chapter 1499. In the Crimson Moon Hall, Tian looked at Qi Yifeng with a complicated gaze, but there was no reaction on his face. He did not expect Qi Yifeng to be interested in the origin earth stone. Inescapable net Qi Yifeng, looks like the origin earth stone is indeed not simple. Tian thought in his heart, then his eyes flickered and he said indifferently, Lord Palace Master, I have not obtained the origin earth stone yet, so it is inconvenient for me to use it to trade. Please forgive me. Although Tian was now a member of the Crimson Moon Divine Palace in name, Qi Yifeng did not have any restrictions on him, and did not dare to do anything to him. Qi Yifeng was stunned for a moment, and seeing that Tian had no intention of trading with him, he hurriedly said, Tian, the origin earth stone is not very useful to you, it can at most help you to increase your strength a little faster. I can use god elixirs, godheads or divine beast cores to exchange for the origin earth stone. How about it? A strange smile appeared on Tian's face. The more nervous Qi Yifeng was, the more it showed how important the origin earth stone was to him. And the more nervous Qi Yifeng was, the more impossible it was for Tian to give up on the origin earth stone. He had to see what secrets were hidden in the origin earth stone. Lord Palace Master, I will not use the origin earth stone to trade. Tian looked at Qi Yifeng and decided not to talk nonsense with him anymore. Qi Yifeng was stunned for a moment, and his expression became extremely ugly. The reason he mentioned to Tian about joining the Holy Parliament was to divert Tian's attention and lead Tian to ignore the origin earth stone. But he did not expect Tian to be so vigilant and not fall for it at all. Tian did not look at Qi Yifeng's reaction. He smiled faintly and turned to leave. Chi Yifeng's face was so gloomy that it looked like blood was dripping from it. His eyes shot out a vicious light that actually contained a faint killing intent. He was furious that Nie Tian had rejected him so directly. However, he didn't dare to attack Nie Tian. Not to mention the enormous power behind Nie Tian's current status as a lesser god chief meant that he didn't dare to casually kill him. Nie Tian, I must get the Mother Earth Essence Stone. Let's wait and see. Chi Yifeng looked at Nie Tian's back, his eyes cold and murderous as he said viciously in his heart. Song Yu sensed Chi Yifeng's killing intent and couldn't help but frown with a puzzled expression. He didn't understand why Chi Yifeng wanted the Origin Earth Essence Stone so badly. Chi Yifeng even wanted to kill Nie Tian for the Origin Earth Primordial Stone, which made Song Yu even more confused. After Nie Tian left the Scarlet Moon Great Hall, he directly returned to the small courtyard. Mo Rushi and Cher were very happy to see that Nie Tian was fine and didn't ask too many questions. The next morning, Nie Tian brought Mo Rushi and the others to the Scarlet Moon Great Hall. The heartbroken young master was already waiting for them outside the Great Hall. Ed had also arrived. He had been with Wang Haolin during the days when Nie Tian was participating in the Lesser God tournament. Lord Holy Judge. Nie Tian came before the heartbroken young master and greeted him respectfully. The heartbroken young master had saved him many times, so it was only right for him to show respect. Nie Tian. The heartbroken young master nodded slightly. His gaze swept past Nie Tian and seemed to have discovered something. His eyes couldn't help but tremble in surprise. After not seeing him for 3 days, he discovered that not only had Nie Tian recovered from his injuries, but his strength had also advanced. It was really terrifying. He clearly remembered that Nie Tian's injuries were very serious. An ordinary lesser god would need at least half a month to recover from such a serious injury. It was too strange that Nie Tian recovered in 3 days and even advanced his strength by a small realm. However, the heartbroken young master didn't ask too much. After all, every martial artist had their own secret. Lord Holy Judge, is it okay for my 3 friends to follow me to the God Shepherding Domain? Nie Tian nodded slightly and asked the heartbroken young master. Of course. The heartbroken young master replied with a smile. Then, he flipped his palm and a ray of light appeared. Immediately, a 7-colored halo spread out and gradually expanded. Gradually, it condensed into a spirit boat that was 10 meters long and 5 meters wide. Nie Tian was slightly stunned. He couldn't help but feel surprised when he sensed the terrifying space-time aura from the spirit boat in front of him. Nie Tian, this is a realm divine boat. It can travel through different territories space-time. We will ride it to the God Shepherding Domain later. The heartbroken young master knew that Nie Tian had never seen a realm divine boat before, so he explained with a smile. Nie Tian nodded solemnly. His face was slightly shocked. A divine boat that could travel through the space-time of a territory was indeed not simple. At this moment, the 12 palace lords were also present. When they saw the realm divine boat, their eyes were burning with excitement. The realm divine boat was very expensive. Only the top divine weapon masters and divine array masters in the 9 major territories could create one. Even the 12 palace lords didn't have such a thing. Everyone, let's go. The heartbroken young master glanced at the palace lords and gestured for Nie Tian to enter the divine boat. At this moment, the divine boat opened slowly. The 7-colored light condensed into a passage. It was very magical. Nie Tian nodded excitedly. He didn't stand on ceremony and stepped into the passage. Instantly, he felt that the space-time around him had changed. It was as if he had entered another world. Even the flow of time seemed to have changed. Then, Mo Rushi, Cher, Nie Chio, and Ed also boarded the divine boat. The heartbroken young master was the last to board the divine boat. He cupped his hands at the 12 palace lords and was ready to leave. The faces of the palace lords were burning with envy. Only Chi Yefeng was smiling, but his eyes were very gloomy. It was obvious that he was planning something. The heartbroken young master didn't waste any time. After the divine boat was closed, a ball of light surged out of his palm and entered the divine boat. Immediately, a pair of colorful light wings that were dozens of meters long appeared outside the divine boat. The divine weapon masters and divine array masters of the territory are indeed extraordinary. They can actually create a divine artifact like the realm divine boat. Nie Tian couldn't help but exclaim in his heart when he saw the scene outside the divine boat. Actually, the realm divine boat was very similar to the spirit boat in the heaven domain. However, the space-time aura inside it was much stronger than the spirit boat. It was as if the realm divine boat was made of pure energy. It was very magical. Whoosh! The next moment there was a loud sound. The realm divine boat flapped its wings and rose into the sky like a strange bird. When it reached an altitude of tens of thousands of meters, it broke through the void and entered the space-time. Nie Tian felt his vision go black. Only then did he realize that the realm divine boat had actually entered the space-time crack. TSK, TSK, TSK. It was pitch black all around. Only an ear-piercing sound could be heard. It was as if they were moving underground. Nie Tian knew that this was the sound produced by the friction between the realm divine boat and the space-time storm. This made him even more surprised. The realm divine boat could actually withstand the impact of the space-time storm. It was really crazy. The darkness in front of them didn't last for long. It seemed like it only lasted for a dozen seconds. Suddenly, the surroundings became bright. We've reached the Mushin territory. The heartbroken young master smiled faintly and reminded Nie Tian and the others. This. Nie Tian was stunned. He couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. His expression became blank. The God Awakening territory and the Mushin territory were two different territories. They actually used only a dozen seconds to pass through the territory. This was too fast. It was impossible to imagine how far apart the two territories were. The realm divine boat was really too magical. Chapter 1500. Nie Tian looked at everything in front of him and felt the boundless space. He murmured, "Is this the God Shepherding territory?" The God Shepherding territory was one of the three middle realms, while the God Awakening territory was one of the three lower realms. Nie Tian could clearly feel that the God Awakening territory was much denser than the God Awakening territory. Moreover, this world gave off a feeling of infinite brilliance, as if there was no end to it. At this moment, Nie Tian finally understood how narrow the world he had known when he was in the Heaven Realm's divine territory. In fact, the breadth of one's vision was closely related to the world one was in. It was not easy for a martial artist from the 3,000 small worlds to think of the Meru world. A martial artist from the Heaven Realm's divine territory's greatest wish was to break through to the godly state. For martial artists from the divine territory, the pinnacle of the godly state or even higher was what they pursued. Nie Tian, the world we are in now is the God Shepherding territory. The heartbroken prince smiled faintly. Then, he flipped his palm and the realm divine boat disappeared. Nie Tian couldn't help but look at the heartbroken prince. He chuckled and said, "Lord Holy Judge, this realm divine boat must be very rare, right?" The heartbroken prince nodded with a smile and said, "The realm divine boat we are on is a one-time use. It can only allow martial artists to cross realms once. After that, it can't be used again. However, there are only a few hundred of these one-use realm divine boats in the 9 major realms." Nie Tian went blank for a moment before exclaiming, "So few?" He didn't expect the realm divine boat to be so precious, and it could only be used once. It seemed like the space-time storm was powerful. Even a divine artifact like the realm divine boat could only withstand it once. Originally, Nie Tian wanted to borrow the heartbroken prince's realm divine boat for fun. Now, it seemed like he was overthinking. "Of course it's rare." The heartbroken prince sighed and said, In the 9 major realms, there are less than 10 divine artifact masters who can make realm divine boats. How precious do you think a realm divine boat is? Nye Tian was speechless. Alright, let's go straight to Mu City. I reckon that the holy adjudicators from the other 2 realms have already gone there. The heartbroken prince smiled faintly and prepared to leave. Roar, roar, roar. Right at this moment, a shrill cry suddenly rang out from the horizon, following which countless huge figures flew past. Nye Tian couldn't help but stare blankly. He raised his head to look up into the sky, and what entered his eyes was actually a flock of giant snow-white birds that carried a scarlet-red log on their backs as they flew forward with all their might. The snow-white bird's body was 2,000 meters long, and its wingspan was 5,000 to 6,000 meters. It was like a floating cloud. However, Nye Tian's eyes were fixed on the giant red wood on the giant white bird's body. He used his divine sense to sense a very strong life force. It's the snow rock transporting the dragon bloodwood. Maybe it's because they're building a new city, young Master Heartbroken said indifferently as he raised his head to take a look. Oh. Nye Tian nodded slightly and then didn't pay any more attention to it. The divine husbandry territory was indeed powerful. They even used the dragon bloodwood to build a city. Young Master Heartbroken didn't waste any time. He moved and flew up into the sky. Mu City wasn't far from where they were. About half an hour later, an extremely majestic city appeared in front of Nye Tian and the others. What a huge city! Nye Tian couldn't help but exclaim as he looked down at Mu City from the sky. Mu City had a circumference of 1,000 miles, and it was surrounded by huge city walls. The entire city was like a huge shield lying on the ground. Nye Tian, this is Mu City. The Holy Parliament's branch in the Divine Husbandry Territory is located in Mu City. Young Master Heartbroken Prince was slightly excited. As long as he safely escorted Nye Tian and the others to the Holy Parliament's branch, his mission as a holy judgment would be completed. What happened next would depend on Nye Tian and Edi's performance. Lord Holy Judgment, is Elder Yang also in Mu City? Nye Tian's eyes flickered as he asked casually. Since Elder Yang said he's in the Divine Husbandry Territory, then he should be in Mu City. Young Master Heartbroken Prince knew what Yang Wu had said to Nye Tian, so he nodded and said. Nye Tian frowned. He was a little worried that they would bump into Yang Wu. Yang Wu was overly enthusiastic that day, so Nye Tian was wary of him. Most importantly, Yang Wu was too strong. Nye Tian was worried that the secret of his god-fiend origin embryo would be exposed. However, it was useless for him to worry too much. He could only enter Mu City first. Young Master Heartbroken Prince immediately led Nye Tian and the others to land outside Mu City. They then entered the city directly. After entering the city, Nye Tian felt that Mu City was more prosperous than he had imagined. The streets were a few hundred meters wide, and it was bustling with people. At a glance, there were heads everywhere. Nye Tian immediately sensed the strength of the people around him. Most of them were godly state martial artists. There were very few martial artists below the Heavenly Emperor realm. He even sensed a few powerful auras that were not much weaker than young Master Heartbroken Prince. Young Master Heartbroken Prince did not stop. He immediately led Nye Tian and the others to the branch of the Holy Parliament. Nye Tian looked at the majestic palace in front of him in shock. This was the largest palace he had ever seen. The entire palace looked grand and magnificent, like a mountain. Let's go in, young Master Heartbroken Prince said. He took a step forward and came to the entrance of the Parliament. At this moment, 2 figures in black descended. Although they had concealed their auras, they still gave off a strong sense of oppression. Young Master Heartbroken Prince did not say anything. He immediately showed them the token of the Holy Assembly. The 2 men in black bowed slightly and gestured for young Master Heartbroken Prince and the others to enter. As soon as they entered the hall, Nye Tian felt a weak aura of a spell formation. He tried to sense it with his divine sense, but he found that the power of the spell formation was extremely profound. The more he tried to sense it, the more he couldn't sense it. This is the Holy Parliament's place. There must be a powerful divine formation protecting it. I'd better be careful. Nyetian swallowed hard and thought to himself. Young Master Heartbroken Prince led Nyetian and the others to the upper floors of the hall. As soon as they stepped onto the second floor, several figures appeared in front of them. Long time no see, Yu Jiuxiao. The leader of the group was a young man in gray clothes. He was handsome, but his eyes were not kind. He greeted young Master Heartbroken in a strange way. Jiang Baoyu. Young Master Heartbroken Prince's eyes darkened when he saw the young man in gray robes. He said in a cold tone, "Why are you here?" Jiang Baoyu raised her eyebrows and said with a smile, "I'm the holy judge of the Flame Heaven Realm. Why can't I be here?" With these words, he looked at Nye Tian and the others with a disdainful expression. He asked in a cold tone, "Are these the two leaders of the God-shocking realm?" Young Master Heartbroken Prince's face darkened. At that moment, Nye Tian took a step forward. He looked at Jiang Baoyu with a calm expression and said, "My name is Nye Tian, the leader of the God-shocking realm's lesser God-shocking realm. He is the leader of the Heaven Emperor. Is there a problem?" From Yu Jiuxiao and Jiang Baoyu's reactions, Nye Tian could tell that there must be some conflict between them. Now, one was the holy judge of the God-shocking realm, while the other was the holy judge of the Flame Heaven realm. The leader of the God-shocking realm's lesser God-shocking realm only has the strength of a late lesser god. Are all the cultivators of the God-shocking realm trash? Before Jiang Baoyu could say anything, a white-robed man behind her stepped forward and looked at Nye Tian with disdain. "Did you just say I'm trash?" Nye Tian's face darkened. He looked at the white-robed man, his eyes filled with coldness. Chapter 1501. In the hall on the second floor of the Holy Assembly's branch in Mu City of the Divine Shepherd Territory. The white-robed man's eyes flickered as he stared at Nye Tian. His ear-piercing voice resounded in the hall. Nye Tian narrowed his eyes. He didn't expect this guy to be so arrogant as to call all the martial artists of the Divine Shepherd Territory trash. When Nye Tian scanned the white-robed man with his divine sense, he couldn't help but be taken aback. A trace of astonishment flashed across his eyes. The white-robed man's strength had exceeded his expectations. He was actually an early-stage mid-god. However, there was nothing strange about it. Most of the martial artists who participated in the lesser god competition would forcibly suppress their strength and make a breakthrough as soon as the competition was over. What really surprised Nye Tian was the white-robed man's age. He was only in his 20s. This man was really in his 20s, but he didn't look like that. Most Divine Realm martial artists looked very young. However, the white-robed man in front of Nye Tian didn't just look young. In fact, he was very young. Nye Tian's perception was extremely sharp. This man's bone age was only in his 20s. There was no doubt about it. A mid-god in his 20s was indeed terrifying. In fact, Nye Tian was also in his 20s. However, as a person who had lived 2 lives, his total age was more than 200 years old. Cher was very young, but her identity was different. Naturally, other martial artists couldn't compare to her. Nye Tian couldn't understand why the white-robed man in front of him was so powerful. Obviously, this man didn't inherit or plunder his godhead. He had condensed it himself. A mid-god in his 20s. At this moment, the heartbroken young lord also sensed something. His eyes trembled violently, and he couldn't help but exclaim in shock. Even the top geniuses of the 3 upper realms couldn't compare to such monstrous strength and talent. Yu Jiuxiao, he's Qin Wuqing, the lesser god leader of the Flame Heaven realm. Compared to the lesser god leaders of the Divine Shepherd Territory, I'm afraid they're like dragons and snake. Jiang Baoyu couldn't help but sneer at the heartbroken young lord's astonishment. Her vicious eyes swept across Nye Tian and the others. Cher's martial body was very strange. No one could tell her bone age. Therefore, even if she was very strong, Jiang Baoyu was not too surprised. As for Nie Tian and Mo Rushi, they were extremely talented, but compared to Chen Wuqing, they were a lot worse. Chen Wuqing and Nie Tian were both low-god leaders. One was an early-stage mid-god, while the other was a late-stage low-god. The gap between them was very obvious. The heartbroken child looked at Chen Wuqing with a burning gaze. He seemed to be thinking about something, and was momentarily speechless. "My lord." At this moment, Nie Tian took a step forward. He calmly glanced at Jiang Baoyu and said, "He and I are both lesser god chiefs. It's hard to say who's the dragon and who's the snake." Nie Tian admitted that Chen Wuqing's talent was indeed shocking. However, he believed that if he were to fight with this person, it would be hard to say who would win. After the grand competition of the 12 shrines, his strength had increased a lot. Especially after the 9 extremes war god art broke through to the 6th level, the extreme wind firmament realm. "Kid, you chose the wrong person to be arrogant in front of me." Chen Wuqing smiled coldly. He suddenly took a step forward and released a sharp murderous aura. The murderous aura turned into a formless blade and pounced at Nie Tian. Pfff. The void trembled slightly. Then, a sharp piercing sound rang out. Nie Tian's expression darkened. A sword intent gushed out and blocked the formless blade in the air. His eyes turned coldly. He didn't expect that Chen Wuqing would dare to attack here. Chen Wuqing's attack was easily blocked by Nie Tian. He was slightly surprised. He didn't want to kill Nie Tian. He just wanted to embarrass the latter. Unfortunately, Nie Tian's strength exceeded his expectations. "Humph." Chen Wuqing immediately calmed down. He smiled evilly and said, "Kid, your strength isn't bad. No wonder you could become the lesser deity chief. However, you will definitely lose to me in the following competition." "Competition?" Nie Tian was slightly stunned. He didn't understand what Chen Wuqing was talking about. But on second thought, the competition Chen Wuqing mentioned should be a competition between the top deities to attract the attention of the Holy Parliament. After all, they were in the Holy Parliament. Even someone as arrogant as Chen Wuqing wouldn't dare to fight. Nie Tian didn't want to waste time with Chen Wuqing. He turned to Heartbroken Prince and said, "Lord Holy Judgment, let's go." Heartbroken Prince nodded and left with Nie Tian and the others. "You Jiuxiao, I will never forget what you did to my sister. One day, I will kill you with my own hands." Jiang Baoyu looked at Heartbroken Prince's back. Her eyes flickered with extreme coldness as she thought to herself, "Lord Holy Judgment, that silver-haired kid's strength is a little strange." Chen Wuqing looked at Nie Tian and whispered, "When we enter the Glaze Demon Pagoda, kill him if there's a chance." Jiang Baoyu's face was cold. She transmitted her voice to Chen Wuqing. "Okay." Chen Wuqing nodded heavily. His lips curled into a cold smile. Heartbroken Prince brought Nie Tian and the others to the 3rd floor. Under the guidance of a green-robed elder, they temporarily came to a room. After entering the room, Heartbroken Prince's expression softened a little. He let out a long breath and felt much more relaxed. Nie Tian frowned slightly. He could faintly see that there was a deep hatred between Heartbroken Prince and Jiang Baoyu. However, Heartbroken Prince obviously didn't want to be entangled with Jiang Baoyu. There seemed to be some guilt in his eyes. Nie Tian didn't know what the grudge between the two was. He wasn't interested, so he naturally wouldn't ask. "Nie Tian, you must be careful of Chen Wuqing." At this moment, the heartbroken young master looked at Nie Tian with a worried expression as he cautiously warned him. "This person's talent is indeed strong. I will be careful." Nie Tian nodded slightly. Even though Chen Wuqing's talent was strong, he wasn't afraid. Heartbroken Prince shook his head and said, "If I'm not wrong, Chen Wuqing is an innate godhead cultivator." "Innate godhead cultivator?" Nie Tian was slightly dazed. He didn't quite understand Heartbroken Prince's words. Heartbroken Prince's eyes narrowed as he said, Godhead is the symbol of a God realm cultivator. Many people inherit their Godhead. Only about 1/10 of them can condense their Godhead. However, there's another way to obtain a Godhead. It's extremely rare, so it's rarely mentioned. Godhead can also be innate. Innate Godhead? Nie Tion's eyes trembled slightly. His expression turned strange. Innate Godhead? This was the first time he heard of such a saying. Yes. Heartbroken Prince nodded solemnly, saying, In this world, there are a small number of cultivators whose martial physique is different from others when they are still a fetus. Their devouring ability is very strong. They can devour powerful energy from their mother's body, directly forming a godhead in the fetus stage. Chapter 1502. Inside the room, Nie Tion was horrified. It took him a long time to calm down. According to the heartbroken young noble, innate godhead martial artists absorbed their mother's energy when they were still a fetus, nurturing their own godhead. This was too frightening. 10 months of gestation, and a fetus was at most 10 months old. To be able to condense a godhead in such a short time, one could see how strong their talent was. At this moment, the heartbroken young noble's expression turned solemn as he said, In truth, the innate godhead cultivators devour their mother's strength. This is a kind of godhead plunder in disguise. However, the majority of mothers won't reject this kind of plunder. For their children, they would sacrifice themselves. Nie Tion's eyes narrowed again. He said in a solemn tone, You mean to say that innate godhead martial artists' godheads are stolen from their mothers? The heartbroken young noble nodded solemnly. After an innate godhead martial artist is born, his mother will become extremely weak. Most of them die directly. So that's how it is. Nie Tion frowned. It seemed like innate godhead martial artists weren't that good. Although it was an unconscious state, it indirectly harmed their loved ones. If given a choice, most people wouldn't want to be an innate godhead martial artist. A mother could sacrifice herself for her child, but which child would be willing to hurt his own mother? Chen Wuqing was an innate godhead martial artist. In other words, he was born as a god realm martial artist. His strength was higher than most people's peak at birth. To advance from a lower god to a mid-god in 20 years, this speed of improvement was monstrous. Innate godhead martial artists not only absorb their mother's energy to condense their godhead, but also inherit their mother's martial comprehension. If his mother was a high god martial artist, then the moment he was born, not only would he possess the strength of an early-stage low god, but he would also have the martial arts comprehension of a high god martial artist. In the future, his strength would also rise very quickly. The heartbroken young master nodded slightly and continued. Nie Tion smiled faintly. It seemed like Chen Wuqing being in the mid-god realm wasn't that monstrous. Maybe his mother was once a superior deity martial artist. Nie Tion, the Holy Assembly will arrange some tests for you. It is very likely that you will take the test together with Chen Wuqing and another lesser god chief. If you encounter Chen Wuqing, you must be careful. The heartbroken young master frowned slightly and said, According to my observation, this person is gloomy, arrogant, and perverse. I'm afraid he will harm you. Thank you for your reminder, Lord Holy Judge. Nie Tion nodded with a smile. Chen Wuqing was not an ordinary person. How could he, Nie Tion, be a pushover? Chen Wuqing could be arrogant, but if he were to be arrogant in front of Nie Tion would definitely not let him off. Nie Tion calmed down and asked curiously, Lord Holy Judgment, what kind of test are we going to take next? The test arranged by the Holy Council must be extraordinary. Some tests of martial arts talent and martial will should be easy for you. The heartbroken young master smiled faintly, but he did not explain in detail to Nie Tion. Seeing that the heartbroken young master was unwilling to speak, Nie Tion did not ask further. After a while, the heartbroken young master felt that it was about time and left with Nie Tion and the others. Before long, they arrived at the highest floor of the Holy Council. In front of them was a circular open-air plaza. Not far from the plaza, Jiang Baoyu and the others had already appeared. On the other side, a handsome gray-robed man appeared. Behind him were two beautiful women. Nie Wushang. The heartbroken young master was stunned when he saw the man in gray. He murmured, "I didn't expect the holy judge of the spirit god domain to be from the Nie family." The Nie family? Nie Tian's eyes trembled when he heard these words. He then looked at the man in gray. The man looked very young, but in fact, he should be thousands or even tens of thousands of years old. His strength was about the same as the heartbroken young master. There was a faint smile on his handsome face, and he seemed very reserved. Nie Tian looked at Nie Wushang and said inwardly, "I wonder what position this person has in the Nie family. Does he know father?" The current Nie Tian did not feel much about the Nie family. On the contrary, he felt very unfamiliar with them. "Brother Yu, Brother Jiang, long time no see." Nie Wushang stepped forward and greeted the heartbroken young master and Jiang Baoyu with a faint smile. The heartbroken young master responded with a smile, while Jiang Baoyu's face was gloomy as if he did not see Nie Wushang. Nie Wushang did not care. His deep gaze swept across Nie Tian and the others. When he saw Nie Tian, his gaze clearly paused for a moment, as if he had discovered something. However, it quickly disappeared, and he concealed it well. Although Yu Jiuxiao, Jiang Baoyu, and Nie Wushang were all holy judges of the Holy Council, they did not have a deep relationship with each other. They did not communicate much. After a while, the void trembled slightly. Two figures descended from the sky and landed on the plaza. The two figures exuded a deep aura, like the mountains and the sea. Just by standing there, they gave people a feeling of looking up to a tall mountain. He really came. Nie Tian looked at the two people. When he saw Yang Wu, his eyes couldn't help but sink. He knew Yang Wu's strength, and the latter seemed to be very interested in him. This made him very uneasy. Elder Yang, Elder Shui. The two figures landed. Chapter 1503. Boom! An extremely violent aura burst out from the void and crushed down on Nie Tian. Feeling the enormous pressure, Nie Tian let out a muffled groan, and a pained expression appeared on his face. Apparently, he was in great pain. The person who attacked was the skinny middle-aged man next to Yang Wu. Since he could stand next to Yang Wu, his strength and status must be on par with him. He should be a paramount god. Of course, the pressure of a paramount expert was not something that Nie Tian could withstand. Nie Tian. At that moment, Cher saw that Nie Tian was being suppressed. She shouted and drew her fallen god's sword. With a thrust, a sword shadow that looked like the setting sun shot toward the skinny man. "Aunt, don't overestimate yourself." The skinny man smirked coldly. With a wave of his hand, a violent shockwave rolled out, shattering Shui-Er's sword silhouette. Shui-Er felt a massive force slamming into her, sending her flying backwards. Cher. Nie Tian's eyes suddenly turned red when he saw this. An extremely violent killing intent surged out from his body. He wanted to break through the skinny man's pressure. However, the pressure of a paramount god was not something he could break. The more he resisted, the more pain he had to bear. Yang Wu looked at Nie Tian and seemed to sense something. His eyes trembled violently and he roared, "Blood Frost, what do you think you're doing?" As his furious voice fell, Yang Wu released a golden light from his body, directly shattering the lean man's oppressive aura. Nie Tian felt the pressure on his body disappear. He moved to Cher's side and asked nervously, "Cher, are you okay?" Cher wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth. Her face was a little pale. Seeing that Nie Tian was fine, she shook her head and said, "I'm fine." Nie Tian used his divine sense to check Cher's body. He was relieved to make sure that she was fine. At this time, he suddenly looked at the lean man and growled, "Bastard, what do you want?" As the furious curses fell, everyone was stunned and looked at Nye Tian in astonishment. Xue Man Shuang was an elder of the Holy Parliament, and his status was incomparably noble. Nye Tian actually dared to insult him in public. Wasn't this courting death? Xue Man Shuang's face sank and he said coldly, "Do I need to explain to you what this elder wants to do? Even if you're a lesser god chief, you're nothing more than an ant in my eyes. If I wanted to, I could crush you to death at any time." His ice-cold voice was filled with extreme overbearingness. His eyes were filled with cold disdain. The hearts of young Master Heartbroken and the others shuddered, and their expressions changed. Just based on Nye Tian's cursing just now, even if Xue Man Shuang killed him on the spot, it would not be excessive. Nye Tian stared at Xue Man Shuang without the slightest fear. Instead, he took a step forward and said in a deep voice, "You can try." He knew that Cher and Mo Rushi were protected by powerhouses from the inescapable net. Fortunately, Xue Man Shuang did not kill Cher just now. Otherwise, he would have forced out the inescapable net's hidden guards. Cher was respected as Her Highness by the Earth Chief, Dugu Lingtian, and the others. Her status was unimaginably high. The inescapable net's hidden guards would not let anything happen to Cher even if they had to risk their lives. Although Xue Man Shuang was very strong, it was hard to say who would win if he encountered the inescapable net's hidden guards. "Little bastard, you're courting death." Xue Man Shuang frowned and his body trembled. He actually wanted to attack again. "Impudent!" At this moment Yang Wu roared. He looked at Xue Man Shuang coldly and said, "Xue Man Shuang, if you dare to be impudent again, don't blame this elder for not showing mercy." Xue Man Shuang was stunned for a moment, but then he smiled and said, "Elder Yang, don't be nervous. I just want to test this kid who made you Jiu Xiao use the Sacred Assembly's token. What ability does he have?" "Test?" Nye Tian's face darkened, and his eyes were cold like killing intent. Xue Man Shuang attacked him for no reason, just to test his strength. One had to know that Xue Man Shuang almost killed him just now. If this was just a test, the plain was too much. Even a 3-year-old would not believe such a reason to test him. It was obvious that Xue Man Shuang's purpose of suddenly attacking Nye Tian was not simple. "Probe?" Yang Wu sneered and retorted, "Then what did you find out?" "There are many things that I want to know." Xue Man Shuang smiled faintly, but his face was extremely gloomy. When Yang Wu heard Xue Man Shuang's words, his gaze involuntarily tightened, and he said in his heart, could it be that he detected something too? Just now, in that instant when Nye Tian resisted, Yang Wu sensed that familiar aura becoming stronger. He was very certain that there was a power in Nye Tian's body that belonged to Nye Fenghua. Yang Wu could not understand why Nye Tian's body would actually have Nye Fenghua's power. He had a bold guess in his heart, but he did not dare to confirm it. Before confirming this guess, he absolutely would not let anything happen to Nye Tian. "Big brother, I'll definitely figure out just what relationship this young man has with you," Yang Wu secretly said in his heart as he looked deeply at Nye Tian. But he was somewhat worried now. If something happened to Xue Man Shuang, then it would be terrible. Regarding Nye Fenghua's matters, Yang Wu knew everything. The guess in his heart was, Nye Tian was Nye Fenghua's son. In the past, because of the God-fiend origin embryo, Nye Fenghua was imprisoned, but the God-fiend origin embryo had disappeared. If Yang Wu's guess was right, then the Nye Tian in front of him was the legendary God-fiend origin embryo. The reappearance of the God-fiend origin embryo in the realms would definitely cause a huge commotion in the 9 realms. I hope this guy didn't discover anything, Yang Wu thought to himself as he shot a glance at Xue Man Shuang. Then, he turned to Nye Tian and said, Nye Tian, my young friend, it was the Holy Assembly's fault just now. I apologize on behalf of the Holy Assembly. As an elder of the Holy Council, I promise you that what happened just now will never happen again. After saying that, Yang Wu fiercely looked at Xueman Huang. His meaning was very clear. If Xueman Huang dared to attack again, then he would publicly shed all pretense of cordiality. "Thank you, Elder Yang." Nie Tian slightly nodded and calmed down a lot. At this moment, he was also worried that Xueman Huang might have discovered something, so he attacked him. Xueman Huang's sudden attack made Nie Tian uneasy. At this moment, Xueman Huang's cold gaze swept across Nie Tian, and then he looked at Cher. He smiled strangely and said faintly, "This young lady is not simple. She has already reached the sword essence stage at such a young age, and she also has a powerful bloodline power in her body. Interesting." As he spoke, Xueman Huang's cold gaze flickered intensely, as if he wanted to learn a huge secret from Cher. Seeing Xueman Huang's reaction, Nie Tian's calm expression turned gloomy again. Xueman Huang was an elder of the Holy Council, so his strength could be imagined. Chapter 1504. Nie Tian looked gloomily at Xueman Huang. His eyes were filled with a trace of worry. Cher's beautiful eyes flickered and turned extremely cold. She said indifferently, "My strength is my own business. It has nothing to do with you." Xueman Huang's eyes slightly quivered. Then, she let out a strange laugh and said nothing else. Nie Tian heaved a long sigh of relief. It seemed that Xueman Huang did not see anything wrong. Perhaps she simply felt that Cher was very talented in sword arts. Cher was only an early-stage mid-god, but her sword arts had reached the essence of sword realm. She was indeed very terrifying. "Xueman Huang, have you had enough?" At this moment, Yang Wu stepped forward and glared at Xueman Huang. He said in a cold tone, "If you have had enough, we will get down to business." "Sure." Xueman Huang smiled sinisterly and casually. Young Master Heartbroken let out a long sigh. He was also puzzled by what he saw. He did not know why Xueman Huang would suddenly attack Nie Tian. Fortunately, Yang Wu intervened in time. Otherwise, the consequences would have been unimaginable. Yang Wu nodded solemnly. He glanced at the crowd and stretched out his palms. Immediately, two masses of light gushed out and rapidly rotated above his palms. Gradually, they condensed into two towers of light. The crowd's eyes couldn't help but flicker intensely when they saw the towers of light in Yang Wu's hands. The two towers of light had the same shape and appearance, but one was bigger than the other. Both were emitting a glazed halo and emanating a mysterious aura that gave people a very comfortable feeling. Glazed demonic tower. Young Master Heartbroken and the others clearly recognized the towers of light. Their faces froze for a moment and their eyes glowed with blazing divine light. At this moment, Yang Wu suddenly raised his hands. The two towers of light left his palms and flew into the sky. Then, they suddenly expanded into enormous towers of light that were hundreds of meters tall. The two towers of light, one large and one small, were about 1,000 meters apart. They floated in midair with glazed halos circulating around them. They looked extremely dazzling and illusory, as though they were in a dream. When Nie Tian and the others saw this scene, their eyes became scorching hot. Clearly, they were greatly shocked. Yang Wu's eyes swept across Nie Tian and the other 5 leaders. He faintly smiled and said, "This is the glazed demonic tower. It has a total of 18 floors. It is the supreme treasure of the Holy Parliament. The glazed qi contained in the tower is extremely mysterious, of glazed qi that can comprehensively enhance a warrior's body. The higher the level of the glazed demon pagoda, the higher the concentration of glazed qi, and the greater the improvement it can bring to your martial body. Next, you will have to enter the glazed demon pagoda and do your best to climb to the highest point of the pagoda. Qi and you will with you. Yang man of long of Wu. And Yang Wu with and of Jiaf Wu of he. Everyone stared at the two glazed demonic towers, one big and one small, with great greed in their eyes. The glazed demonic tower contained qi. That was a mysterious power that could enhance a warrior's body. Who wouldn't want it? Moreover, the glazed demonic tower could test a warrior's talent and jive. To prove themselves, everyone would try their best to climb to the higher floors of the demonic tower. Among everyone present, only Nye Tian's reaction could be considered calm. He stared at the glazed demon pagoda and suddenly took a step forward, asking indifferently, "Elder Yang, is the glazed demon pagoda very difficult to climb?" Yang Wu looked at Nye Tian and said with a smile, "The glazed demonic tower is an ancient sacred item. It has high requirements for a warrior. Ordinary warriors can't even step into the glazed demonic tower. Even for those self-proclaimed geniuses, it is already very good if they can step into the first 3 floors. Only monstrous geniuses can step into the 3rd floor and above. But even the top warriors of the 9 major domains can only enter the 5th floor of the glazed demonic tower. For hundreds of thousands of years, countless geniuses have entered the glazed demonic tower. Those who can step into the 5th floor and above are undoubtedly the pinnacle experts of their generation. The Holy Parliament has been established for hundreds of thousands of years. The most terrifying record is the 9th floor of the glazed demonic tower. The 9th floor is the pinnacle record of the glazed demonic tower. Only 2 people have achieved it. At this point, Yang Wu's face turned slightly solemn as though he had thought of something. When the others heard Yang Wu's words, their faces turned sluggish with excitement and yearning. For hundreds of thousands of years, the record of the glazed demonic tower was only the 9th floor. This was too terrifying. One should know that the demonic tower had 18 floors. May I ask, Lord Elder, who are the 2 lords who stepped into the 9th floor of the glazed demonic tower? At this time, Chen Wuqing suddenly took a step forward. His eyes were burning with passion. Obviously, he wanted to compete with the senior experts. Those 2 lords are forbidden figures in the 9 major domains. Their names cannot be mentioned casually. Yang Wu glanced at Chen Wuqing and said, "But there aren't many people here. It's okay for me to tell you." As soon as Yang Wu finished his sentence, everyone looked at him with excitement and agitation. At this moment, even the eyes of the 3 holy judges were in a daze. They also didn't know who the 2 people who stepped into the 9th floor were. One of the 2 lords who stepped into the 9th floor is Tian Kuei of the inescapable net. Yang Wu said in a deep voice. His eyes trembled slightly as he said, "The other one is the Young Alliance Master of the Wind and Cloud Alliance, Nye Fenghua." Tian Kuei. Nye Fenghua. Hearing these 2 names, everyone's eyes trembled violently and revealed great shock. Even though Chen Wuqing and the others didn't know who the 2 people were, they knew from their identity that they must be super experts who could intimidate a region. When Nye Tian heard these 2 names, his face changed and his eyes flickered with a trembling light. He knew both of these names. Tian Kuei, one of the 2 supreme Kuei of the inescapable net. Although Nye Tian had never seen him before, he had seen Earth Kuei before. He was a very terrifying figure. Although Tian Kuei and Earth Kuei existed side by side, Tian Kuei's strength and status were obviously more terrifying than Earth Kuei's. As for the other person, Nye Tian was more familiar with him because that person was his father. He didn't expect his father to be so monstrous and be someone who could stand shoulder to shoulder with Tian Kuei. Thinking of this, Nye Tian's eyes revealed a sharp light. He looked at the 2 glazed demon towers and said in his heart, "Father, can I break your record?" Since there was a chance to enter the glazed demon towers, Nye Tian naturally wanted to break the previous record, even if it was set by his father. When Yang Wu suddenly mentioned Nye Fenghua, his expression became slightly solemn. All these years, he had been searching for Nye Fenghua's whereabouts, but unfortunately, he hadn't been able to find him. However, he wouldn't give up and would definitely continue searching. After a moment, Yang Wu's expression returned to normal. He nodded and said loudly, 6 chiefs, you can enter the glazed demon towers now. Heavenly Emperor chiefs, enter the small glazed demon tower. Lowly god chiefs, enter the major glazed demon tower.